All right. Welcome, everybody, to the March 15th, 2023 City of Planning Commission meeting. We're excited to have you here. Thank you. On behalf of the Planning Commission, we're grateful that all of you are here and anyone else who's tuning in. It's your curiosity and participation and feedback that are very insightful and instrumental to this process as we navigate change here in Edina regarding the way in which people want to use their land. So thank you for being here. On that note, the city is committed to getting your feedback in all different ways, specifically through our engagement website, bettertogetheredina.org. It's important you know that all comments that have been submitted have been received by us and reviewed. You do not need to submit the same feedback in another way, but are welcome to. Tonight we have 2 public hearings. Individuals who want to provide testimony remotely for those can call the following number, 786-496-4601, and enter conference pin 761-3141#. Then press star 1 on your keypad when you'd like to get in the queue to speak. An operator will introduce you when it's your turn. Please state your full name and address before speaking. When that comes, I'll let you know. Everyone's allowed 3 minutes to speak. Staff member Liz Olson will let anyone who calls in know if they went over 3 minutes. All right, we will move to our agenda. So we'll begin first with a call to order. There we go. And next is roll call. And we got some new planning commissioners here tonight, so that's fun. Roll call.
Commissioner Padilla.
Present.
Commissioner Miranda.
Here.
Commissioner Felt. Here. Commissioner Smith.
Here.
Commissioner Hu.
Here.
Commissioner Bernstein.
Here.
Commissioner Strauss.
Here.
Commissioner Day.
Here.
Chair Bennett.
Here. I'm hearing a slight echo, and I'm sure other people are. Maybe someone can look into it. But either way, we're going to get to the next pieces. So that's approval of our meeting agenda and then the meeting minutes. But we'll start with the meeting agenda. Do I have a motion to approve?
Also move.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
So moved. Next, we have the approval of the meeting minutes. So this is approval of the draft meeting minutes from our meeting on February 8th, 2023. Before I welcome a motion, does anyone have any comments or proposed changes to those minutes? Hearing none, I'll welcome a motion to approve those.
I move to approve the minutes.
Second? And a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, so moved. Next, we have, setting the tone, special recognitions and presentations, and we have 2 things. First and foremost, and most excitingly, welcome to our new Planning Commission members. We have Will, Meriwether, and Ryan, and want to give each of you guys like a couple minutes to introduce yourselves. Maybe we can start with you and then just work your way around. Welcome.
Sure, thank you. So I'm Ryan Day. I live in the Braemar Hills neighborhood. I've been in Edina for about 2 years. Live right across the street from the high school on Chapel Lane, so with my wife and my dog Logan. We get the pleasure of having the marching band come practice in our neighborhood all the time during the spring and summer. So that's I always have to put my Zoom meetings on mute when they come through. But enjoying Edina so far and really joining the committee to become more involved. So thanks.
All right, Will, doing techno.
Just thought maybe the echo would stop. Well, hi everybody. Nice to see everybody here. My name's Will Bornstein. I have been a resident of Edina since 2018. I bought a house with my wife in the Morningside neighborhood. We live near 44th and France. So if you're walking by there, you probably might see us sometime. Outside of this, I'm an attorney. And outside of that, I've been interested and involved in zoning and planning and development issues for a while. Before I moved to Edina, I lived in South Minneapolis and was the president of a neighborhood association there. and a member of the Zoning and Planning Committee that reviewed a lot of the development projects that South Minneapolis took, including everything that was basically built on Lyndale, Hennepin, and Lake Street, and everything in between. And so have some history of trying to balance the interests of residents and developers and then the general public to get the best projects we can. So just excited to be here and look forward to hearing from you.
My name is Mary Weatherfeld. I've been an Edina resident for 16 years now. My daughter is now in college. She went through her entire public school years here in Edina. I also live in the Morningside neighborhood and have always been engaged with the city on a lot of different subjects. So now I'm really looking forward to kind of giving some time back to the community. It's nice to see you all. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Very excited to have you. Got some superstars up here, and that's great for the city and the legacy of development here. The next part is, this is as well our annual election, our annual meeting. So with that, we will do an election of vice chair and secretary. Currently, Lou Miranda holds the secretary role, and I guess open it up for discussions or nominations to fill the vice chair role.
And we do need to could be reaffirming the chair position as well. It's the annual meeting where we need to do
I guess we
all positions.
Okay,
Yes.
I'll re-anoint myself. So does that start with a motion then, Carrie? Okay, I guess we could start with the chair. Hopefully people aren't too upset yet.
I make a motion to elect Jimmy Bennett as chair of the Planning Commission.
Second?
Re-elect her.
I guess, yeah.
Continue.
Yeah, continue.
Okay.
I guess all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, so moved. Cool, that's weird. Move to the vice chair. If there's discussion, Lou, are you interested in that position? No. No? Do we have someone else that'd like to fill the vice chair?
I would nominate Strauss.
Second.
All right, all in favor, say aye. Aye. So moved. Okay, Lou currently holds the secretary role. Are you okay with that still? Okay. Do we need to reaffirm? Okay, I guess, all right. Welcome a motion.
I move to nominate Lou Miranda as secretary.
I second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
So moved. Yes. Cool. Great. All right. Next on the agenda is the community comment period. Now we will hear from residents in person. We got a bit of them who'd like to speak about something not on tonight's agenda or scheduled for a future public hearing. You may speak similarly to the public hearing for 3 minutes. After giving your full name and address, a green light will appear, indicating you have 3 minutes to speak, and then yellow when you have 30 seconds left, and red when your time is up, and we'll ask you to wrap up. Do we have anyone here for community comment? I know we do. Come to the podium, please. Thank you.
Evening, commissioners. Welcome new commissioners. My name is Hope Melton. I'm director of Edina Neighbors for Affordable Housing, and I'm here to, I live at 4825 Valley View Road in Edina, and I'm here to just introduce Edina Neighbors to you. So I will start. I'm going to read this because it keeps me to my 3 minutes, or pretty close. Edina Neighbors for Affordable Housing is a volunteer resident organization dedicated to making Edina a diverse, equitable, and sustainable community. We aim to make affordable housing available for people of all ability levels and stages of life. We began in 2017 and now have close to 150 members. We work collaboratively with the Suburban Hennepin Housing Coalition of housing teams from the west suburbs and Edina resident organizations such as Edina Indivisible the League of Women Voters of Edina, and the Anti-Racism Collective. What do? First, we educate the community about affordable housing. For example, Chris Bremer runs our website, and she is employed by the university, so she has access to their library. So we have a great collection of reports and articles about affordable housing and related issues. We also vet and recommend candidates for the City Council. Second, we are dedicated to producing new and preserving existing affordable housing and protecting Edina's tenant population. For example, we did the research and developed recommendations for Edina's tenant protection policy. Third, we work to ensure that new and renovated affordable units receiving city subsidy conform to Edina's sustainability guidelines and will be affordable for a minimum of 30 years or the lifetime of the building. I'm going to make 3 additional points. First, housing policy is climate policy. In Minnesota, the transportation sector remains a major source of significant carbon emissions. A 2019 University of California, Berkeley study of 700 cities showed that infill urban housing built at higher density near transportation, jobs, and services reduces greenhouse gas emissions more effectively than any other option, including the wider use of electric cars. Second, multiple studies show that R1 single-family zoning significantly reduces the availability of buildable land, thereby raising land prices and contributing in a major way to the housing crisis. Confirming this is a recently published study of national housing politics at Boston University called Neighborhood Defenders: Participatory Politics in America's Housing Crisis. We like to think of public hearings and community engagement events as democratic exercises. This study says not so. Neighborhood Defenders documents how inequalities in political participation in the housing development process significantly restricts the supply of housing. Finally, the climate and the housing crisis, as I'm sure you know, are urgent matters. According to Hennepin County's most recent shelter report, there was a 260% increase, that's 217 households, in family homelessness from 2021 to 2022. Homelessness has a serious and long-lasting impact, especially on child development and school performance. So we would welcome you to our email list. The website is edinaneighborsforaffordablehousing.org, and my email address is hopemelton@hotmail.com. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Hope. Do we have anyone else here that would like to provide testimony at the community comment? Seeing none, we will close the community comment. Thank you. All right, next item on the agenda is the first of our 2 public hearings. So again, we'll now hear from residents. Well, actually, before we get into this piece, just a quick overview of, well, you can come up. Quick overview of the public hearing process is it'll begin with a staff report and presentation. Based off of that, it'll come to the Planning Commission to pose questions to staff. Then we give the opportunity to the applicant or developer to provide their own presentation, whereby we then provide some questions back to them and get some answers. And then we will open it to a public hearing. And then after the public hearing, we'll bring it back to the Planning Commission to deliberate and make a decision recommending approval or denial. And so first we'll start with Planner Rocker.
Thank you. Chair, members of the Planning Commission, this is a request for an east side yard setback variance at 4502 Golf Terrace. The subject property at 4502 Golf Terrace is located on the north side of Golf Terrace, and it backs up to Edina Country Club. It consists of a 2-story home with an attached rear-loading 2-car garage built in 1937, The applicant is requesting a variance to reorient the garage. As you can see on the aerial photograph, there's a very narrow driveway that goes into the rear yard, and then a car has to turn all the way around to get into the garage. So this is the house currently, the house next door, the driveway, and another view of the long driveway. They have to turn around and then enter into the garage that's facing north. So what they were proposing to do is to reorient the garage, add on to the width of it by just a little bit, by 1.6 feet. Currently, the sidewall of the garage is 7.5 feet away from the side lot line, which is non-conforming. The required setback is 10 feet. What you'll notice is it's a nice lot in terms of width. However, the house was not centered. The garage happens to be much closer to that east lot line than the sidewall of the rest of the house to the west lot line. So one challenge for the property in terms of the garage is the orientation as well as the proximity to that east lot line. So what they're proposing on doing is adding to that main floor. Currently the garage is 7.5 feet away. They would be reducing the setback by 1.6 feet so that it would be 5.3 feet away at its closest corner and 5.8 feet away at its furthest corner. That would allow for increasing the width of the garage by a little over, 1.5 feet, which currently the width of the garage is 18.9 feet. A two-car garage, a very, very small width of a two-car garage is about 20 feet. So increasing it by 1.5 feet is not a roomy width for a two-car garage. Now, they will be increasing the depth of it, so technically they could, depending upon the size of the cars, fit 3 cars in there and then also have a mudroom. They are also proposing to have a story above the garage, which would include 2 new bedrooms. That piece would be set back further from that side yard, and it would maintain the required 10-foot setback. So the only area that they're looking at for relief, and the current garage is non-conforming, is on that east sidewall of the main floor of the garage. The rest of the project meets all of the ordinance requirements, as indicated on the compliance table. Bear in mind, the reason why the 4.7-foot variance is required is that the sidewall of the garage is already non-conforming. Back in 2015 and prior to that, the minimum side yard setback for an attached garage was 5 feet, no matter what the width of the lot is. So at one point in time, this house was conforming, or the garage was conforming, as well as in a lot of areas in Edina. You will have a situation where someone will have a 5-foot setback for their garage, but that ordinance changed in 2015. The wider lots are now subjected to a deeper setback. So this is what it would look like in context. The height of that new addition is actually 8 feet shorter than the ridge line of the existing roof. So the area above the garage will be conforming in terms of side yard setback, and it will be much lower than the existing ridge of the roof. So this is it in elevation. You can see that existing ridge line of the house, ridge line of the addition. This is where that second floor is above the garage. And then they would just like a more comfortable width on that garage, as well as facing it to the street instead of having to drive up the 7.5 foot wide, very narrow driveway, making the turn to get into their garage. And then these are the elevations. The west elevation will remain basically the same. And then the east elevation, you can see the ridge line is lower. So I did include some properties that are along Gulf Terrace that are also less than 10 feet, actually in the 5-foot range. This one is even less than 5 feet from the side lot line. So it's not uncommon along the block or even within the neighborhood to see setbacks that are closer than that 10 feet. This one was added onto, and it's somewhere around 6 feet. And then we have another one on the south side that's 5.5 feet. And you could find these conditions throughout the neighborhood, and there certainly are some on the block. So regarding engineering, the overall project does appear to decrease the amount of impervious surface given the length of that driveway. They are also going to be removing some other hard surface areas. The proposed impervious surface calculations will be refined at the time of building permit, but it does appear that they would be reducing impervious surface as well. So the question then becomes, is the proposed variance, will it satisfy the statutory requirements, relieve the practical difficulties that prevent a reasonable use of complying with the ordinance? The proposed use is permitted in the R1 dwelling unit district, and it meets all the ordinance requirements, including the addition above the garage, with the exception of that side yard setback. The addition itself on that main floor is about 1.5 feet. So the actual variance seems much greater than that, but that's because the existing garage was built prior to our current code and is considered non-conforming. The practical difficulty is caused by the existing location of the home and the required setbacks. It's not centered on the lot. The fact that they have this very narrow driveway and having to go into the rear yard, turn the car all the way around to get into their garage, which is quite narrow, and I would presume it'd be a pretty tight fit to get 2 cars in. Are there circumstances that are unique to this property and are not self-created? All of those things that I've mentioned previously. There were no variances granted for the original construction of the home in 1937. However, now it is in a situation where it is non-conforming. And will the variance alter the essential character of the neighborhood? I put up this photograph or this rendering of the homes on either side with the proposed elevation. They will be using similar and matching materials to the existing structure. It should complement the neighborhood, complement the existing home. My understanding is that they have talked to their neighbors and they're supportive of the request. Staff does recommend approval of the 4.7-foot interior side yard setback variance for an existing non-conforming home, expansion to widen the garage by 1.5 feet. The approval is subject to the following findings: that the proposal meets the variance criteria, the practical difficulty is caused by the existing location of the home, not centered on the lot, and the existing non-conforming setback. The proposed addition is reasonable, is not self-created given the placement of the narrow house, or the house and the narrow width of the garage and rear-facing garage door. The current house has a non-conforming east side yard setback and was built prior to the current setback requirements. Granting the variance will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood. And with that, any approval of the variance should be subjected to the conditions of the plans, date stamped December 2nd, 2022, survey date stamped January 19th, 2023, comments and conditions listed in the February 1st, 2023 engineering memo. The Better Together site, I believe, didn't have any comments. The owners, Jay and Ann Simonson, are here. I don't know if their architect is here. But with that, I will stop and answer any questions you may have.
All right, we'll take it back to the Planning Commission for questions. Commissioner Strauss.
Yes, thank you. Planner, the existing curb cut for the driveway just remains the same, so they just realign?
Yes.
The new driveway then enters, and so that
They'll have to widen the driveway towards the west to that garage door.
And then the driveway as it goes along the east side of the house and then in the back, I mean, all that becomes unnecessary or whatever their plans are for that, so, okay.
Correct.
And it appears, I mean, the house to the east seems, your one drawing did not have a 10-foot setback from the lot line either, did it?
It did not.
Yeah, okay. And that's a garage, right, along that?
Yes, it's a garage-to-garage situation.
Okay.
So you'll have two garages adjacent to one another, and then currently you see the driveway that goes around the house. It will end at the front of the garage.
Okay. And library. Okay, no, thank you.
Any other questions? Commissioner Miranda.
Yeah, do you know what the rationale was for changing the setback in 2015?
Oh, in 2015?
Yeah.
At that time, there was concern that on the wider lots, especially if you're going to tear, and it was mostly the focus on the tear-down rebuilds, that if you have a wider lot, you should be able to accommodate those 10 and 10 setbacks, and that the 5-foot setback is just, is uncalled for the wider lots. It was a way to try to keep things further away from the neighboring properties, to address some of those massing issues that were cropping up. Now, in a situation where you have existing conditions, that gets to be more difficult to work with.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Planner Rocker. Now we'll give the opportunity to the applicant to come up and speak or share a presentation or whatever you'd like to do. Yeah.
Thank you, for letting us present here tonight. I'm Dr. Jay Simonson, and my wife, Ann Simonson, is here. And we live at 4502 Golf Terrace in Edina. In respect for your time and to try to be concise, I wrote some things to read here, but I'd be happy to answer questions as well. Our house was built in the late 1930s and has a 2-car garage to fit the size of the cars of that time, which are obviously quite small by today's standards. We actually moved to the house 30 years ago. We've lived there since 1993. And at that time, we had plans to replace and enlarge the garage, but we had more pressing and important priorities when we did a major remodel shortly after we moved in 1995. Additionally, the survey we had done in 1995, to our surprise, revealed that the surveyors of the late 1930s either had trouble with a straight line or the side setbacks were ignored by the original builder, who was Carl Hansen, because it was a surprise to us that we were within that setback area. So when we started talking about redoing the garage, the setback kind of slowed us down about when to approach that, and as such, we've accepted the garage as it is for the last 30 years, and we've been sidestepping ever since then to get in and out of our cars when they're parked in the garage. Now we're getting older, and we're faced with the dilemma of should we move to obtain a wider garage and also a primary bedroom on the upper level, since we don't have a kind of modern sort of master bedroom or primary bedroom in our house. And so we see that's one of the glaring needs for our house if we sell it at sometime in the future. We love our neighborhood, and we have many friends nearby, and so we really wanted to stay here, and rather than to try to leave, so we wanted to try to stay and remodel. We think it'd be hard to duplicate what we have today with what we've got right now. Over the years, we've given a lot of thought to how to best remodel and achieve a more modern vehicle spacing for the garage. And so we feel we've come up with the best plan that we can, and we've asked a lot of other people to think about ideas. Additionally, we feel our house has great curb appeal, and the view of the golf course is spectacular. So we want to keep the same heritage and eloquence that the home has intact. So I want to assure everybody that the remodel would be done conforming to the existing style of the house in the neighborhood. Of note, our neighbors have expressed their approval of our plan to us. We've talked with all our nearby neighbors about it, as well as neighbors far and wide. Specifically, our neighbor to the east, Mr. Jerry Weber, has enthusiastically supported the variance application and is wondering why we have to go through this. So as such, we come to you today to request this variance, and we're requesting the setback on the east side of the garage to allow for a more modern two-car wide garage and our ability to build a new primary bedroom on the second floor above it. Of note, one of the questions, I think you mentioned there were 2 bedrooms. There's really it'd only be 1 bedroom above the garage bedroom and a bath, a master bath up above, along with closets. And we would maintain the fact that we currently have 4 bedrooms in our upper level, and so it would remain 4 bedrooms. And we will be taking out the overall plan will have less concrete than our current lot has, due to the amount of concrete we have in the back. In fact, I already took out 27 by 9 foot piece back there that was there before, because I felt we had more than we needed, although it was nice when our kids were younger to have a big play area back there.
All right, thank you, Jay. Any questions from the Planning Commission? All right, thank you.
Okay, great.
Appreciate it. Now is the part of the meeting that is the public hearing. So we will now hear from residents who would like to provide testimony. For those tuning in remotely to participate, please call in 786-496-5601 if you haven't already. Enter conference pin 761-3141 pound. And again, press *1 to enter the queue. Everyone's allowed 3 minutes to speak. Please give your full name and address. Staff member Liz Olson will let anyone who calls in know if they've gone over 3 minutes. And before we go to those who called in, we'll start with those who are here in person. Do we have anyone who is willing to provide testimony for this public hearing? Please come up if you do. All right. Seeing none, we will go to the line. Has anyone called in for this?
I don't see anyone on the line right now, but I would recommend waiting 1 minute just due to the delay in broadcast so we can make sure nobody's waiting to chat. So I will come back to you at 7:36.
Thank you. And, any Jeopardy music would be welcomed. Or elevator music,
Seeing it is now 7:36, I think it is safe to proceed. Thanks.
All right, with that, I will welcome a motion to close the public hearing.
Move to close public hearing.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. So moved. All right, now we will take it back to the Planning Commission to deliberate and ultimately make a recommendation for approval or denial. Any comments?
Sure. Thank you for your presentation. And I think that it's in very good taste, and I fully support it. And I think it's great that you want to be bigger and better in the community.
Thank you. Any others, or just to follow up? My compliments. I think they obviously went to some extent, so a great extent to work with the failing house, and they're respecting the overall height. They didn't increase that presence and removing the driveway in the back. So I don't see any issues with this. So thank you.
Yes.
I have a comment, and thank you very much. I can't see you through the things, but it is a very nice addition and very well kind of thought out. And I'm sure the neighbors would appreciate not having you drive right along their property line on a regular basis. And this is just a practical consideration about the curb cut. I've seen a few other people kind of keep their same curb cut and then come back in a few years and increase it. So I don't know if that's a requirement or not, but you might want to consider that, the practicality of that.
With respect to the curb cut, you know,
It's not a variance thing, so you can do,
well, just to see, we're thinking of keeping the same one because we have a big tree right there. We love the tree and we don't want to cut down, so we're thinking at least for initially we have the driveway come in with the curb cut, kind of curve into the garage. Although we still trying to decide whether or not to cut down that tree and allow one more straight on the tree, in which case we'd have to remove the curb.
Thank you. Any other comments? Yeah, Commissioner Miranda, please.
Yeah, so the regulation was changed such that in 2015 for tear downs, and this isn't a tear down, so I think that the house isn't moving, so that definitely constrains them. And I like how the second story is actually pulled in a little bit, so it's not it's not a straight wall all the way up, because that would be a little more concerning. So I think that was a good design choice. So for that reason, I would vote for this.
Thank you. Any other comments? Yeah.
That is quite the driveway, and from the side pictures that we got, it seems like every time you try to get into your driveway, just because of how narrow the driveway was, it seems like you would really be testing your driving skills every time you go through because of how narrow it is. And I'm in support. I can't vote, but I like it. I like the new changes.
We do have a number of dents on the side of the car in the garage.
Yeah, just last comment for me. This is relieving practical difficulties as indicated, and this is a reasonable use. So I fully support this as well, and would welcome a motion.
I move to approve the variance.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Congratulations, and good luck with your project. All right, now we will move to our second public hearing of the night, and that is a conditional use permit for 64444, lots of fours, Xerxes Avenue for U.S. Internet. Same kind of process as this last one, and we'll turn it over to Planner Teague to give a presentation.
Yes, thank you, Chair, members of the Commission. So this property is located in the Greater Southdale District on Xerxes Avenue. Here's a look at the site. This site originally was built as a duplex. Back in, I believe it was 2007, the site was rezoned for an office use. An audiology clinic moved in there, and the site was rezoned from R2, where duplexes are allowed, to planned office district. Here's a look at the zoning. It's the little orange piece up there. Site's guided in the comprehensive plan as a community activity center, more dense development area within the Southdale district. What the applicant is proposing here is to construct a 20-foot tall. The renderings here are a little bit skewed. The building is 20 feet, not quite as tall as indicated here. But it's a 1,900 square foot utility building to improve internet service. There are a couple of variances requested here. As you recall from our Southdale Experience guidelines, we require 75% openings on street-facing facades, and buildings need to be primarily brick or stone material facing the public realm. Being this is a private utility, there's security issues with the building, so that's why no windows are proposed here. So the variance to the 75% rule. And they're proposing that 8 feet up would be constructed of stone, and the rest of the building would be an ephes material. that existing duplex on the site would be torn down. They are proposing a east-west sidewalk. There's higher density residential to the north and west of the site. This could provide access to that commercial area. A series of landscaping all around the building. Engineering is suggested, kind of our standard condition of approval of any project like this, that existing sidewalk on the back of the curb be reconstructed with a 5-foot sidewalk and a 5-foot boulevard, just for a safer pedestrian experience there. So this request requires a conditional use permit. Private utilities are a conditionally permitted use in all zoning districts in the city. So conditional use permit, and then those variances that I mentioned. In terms of the site plan, the project is code compliant in regard to setback and height. The reason for the 20-foot height is, again, going back to those Southdale design experience guidelines, we require a 20-foot ceiling for first level project. So the applicant has indicated they don't really need a 20-foot ceiling with this utility building. They'd be willing to go down to 16 feet. There was, as you noticed, in the feedback from the Better Together, we had a lot of concern about the look of the building and the height. So the applicant has indicated a willingness to do that. In terms of the conditional use permit, staff believes that the criteria here is met. Police and fire have adequate access to the site. This site would actually generate less traffic than the audiology clinic. There is just one employee on the site. Customers don't travel to the site. This is a utility building, so hardly any traffic. There is no noticeable noise from the facility. Again, with that east-west pedestrian connection improvements there. And as I mentioned, these utility-type buildings are conditionally permitted in all zoning districts. In terms of the variance criteria, staff finds that the variances are reasonable given the utility nature of the building, so that 75% rule. This is not a site that will generate traffic, again, public not coming and going from the site. In terms of the requiring of the stone, so this one is somewhat subjective. If the Planning Commission doesn't agree with allowing kind of a half stone, half ephes type building, you could deny that variance. We did receive a number of comments on Better Together, as I mentioned, concerns regard with the mass of the building, traffic and noise, the height of the building, comments about windows being a must. But with that, staff is recommending approval of the conditional use permit and the variances subject to the findings and conditions that are outlined in the staff report. With that, I can stand for questions, and the applicant team from US Internet is here to make a presentation as well.
Thank you for still standing for questions. That's nice. Any questions from the Planning Commission?
No question, Jimmy.
Yeah, Commissioners.
Yes, Director Teague. Question on the material. So stone is one option. What are some other material options that could be used for that building? Something that's maybe warmer, more inviting than a brick stone structure.
Stone and brick, those are kind of the two primaries that we're seeking, at least on that first level for new construction.
Gotcha.
And I thought I have a question about the stone as well. I thought I read in here it was a Coronado cultured stone. Does the city consider that a stone?
We would, yeah. Those types of stone product is not uncommon.
Is everybody on the commission, because it's a man-made, it's not a natural stone. But I mean, I suppose you could say brick is a man-made thing too. And I suppose the question would probably be more for the client. I'd like to talk to them about that.
Yeah, they can. Yeah. The architect could go into detail on the material.
Commissioner Strauss.
Yes. Yeah, that view that's up. The at the top of the drawing, it's like a sidewalk or a walkway. What purpose is that? I mean, so that's Xerxes or what? Picking up, I assume that's a sidewalk along the easterly edge. Okay, and then what does that walkway serve?
Yeah, it's really providing a potential connection in the future. Part of what we've considered and talked about in the past is an extension of 65th Street to connect to Xerxes here. According to our city engineer, given the spacing to the intersection at 66, probably not too likely that the county would allow that connection. But that's kind of the idea here, is potentially as these properties, if they redevelop, in particular the back of the existing office building here. You may recall this is phase 2 of that the new residential development here to the west. And there is an easement here for an east-west connection. So potentially this sidewalk potentially could connect there in the future. Should that site redevelop, there could be some coordinating between those buildings.
So it's anticipation of something. And then the sidewalk does continue, what would be along the east property line, I mean down.
Correct, yeah, there's an existing sidewalk.
And it picks up with the existing.
That's back of curb, yeah, we'd like to see that boulevard style.
And there's only like one, or you said person on site. I mean, do they need to park that many cars? I mean, it looks like they're parking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cars. Well, 4 at least. I suppose that's,
yeah,
there
could be a
other
question
excuses.
for the applicant. How much do they really anticipate there? It's mainly utilizing the existing pavement there on the site today.
But they seem to have done a very nice job with their commitment to the landscaping that they're showing. Yeah. So, I mean, that's going to look very nice, I think. Thank you.
Other questions, please? Yeah, Commissioner Miranda.
Yeah, does the staff have opinions on whether 16 or 20 feet is preferable?
I think given the concerns about the mass of the building, 16 feet would be appropriate. We've lowered that standard in other developments from 20 feet to 16 to address that same concern that adjacent residents have in regard to height.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, please, Commissioner Bye.
So I guess around the security concerns, I'm trying to wonder what is, maybe a dumb question, but what's going to be in the building that is of security concern that they would preclude the use of any windows around it at all? Because it was a very hot topic in the feedback from Better Together Edina, so I'm just trying to get further understanding of that.
Yeah, certainly. Maybe I'll let the applicant, I notice it's part of their presentation to describe some of the inner workings inside the building, and they could probably give a much better explanation than I.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right. We will give the applicant a chance to come forward and provide a presentation or speak, whatever you'd like to do.
This presentation might be rough. I actually don't think I'll need them. Chair, council members, thanks for letting me present here today. I'm Kurt Lang with US Internet. I am co-founder of the company. The company started in 1995, so coming up on 30 years. Actually, I get to chime in. I'm also an Edina resident. I've been here for almost 20 years now, so married into it, which is kind of happens to some folks in this town. So, but we're a privately owned, operated company. We're based in Minnetonka. We started in Minneapolis, and we started this fiber project about 10 years ago. Minneapolis first, branched out into St. Louis Park, branching now out into Edina. We've just done part of the Highlands neighborhood in Edina this last year. And we have a lot of interest from Edina residents to continue our expansion into Edina. Our uptake in the Highlands neighborhood was significantly good uptake compared to the construction projects for last year. So it went very well, speaking to Edina residents wanting access. This is a map of our current build out. So you can see the south side of Minneapolis, the green section is live area for us currently. The red box is parts of St. Louis Park that we have built out over the last couple of years. And then the blue box is Edina with that little section of the Highlands neighborhood. This facility that we're talking about building, it says Xerxes CO. You can see it off to the south, east of the map there. These buildings are critical infrastructure for us to be able to service a neighborhood. Without them, we can't do that. Our project is quite a bit different than most traditional providers in that we run conduit up and down both sides of the street. That conduit carries fiber cable from the individual property all the way back to this building that we're talking about here. We're not bringing devices into a specific area and then servicing 8, 6, whatever, 10 blocks from like a box, a utility box that comes all the way back to the central office. And there's actually a lot of good reasons for that. I guess I won't get into all the technical stuff unless you guys have questions about it, but it provides a lot of value. This is a building in Minneapolis, similar structure, does the exact thing that we're talking about here. The scale is a little easier to tell here. The scale of the building in the other drawings, and you'll see it later, was built on the understanding of having the 20-foot ceilings, which made the building 26 feet high. This building is 18 feet high, so you can see the scale is much more compact than the other drawings. So I guess what we're talking about here is we would be 2 feet taller than the building you see here. It's not a very big structure. It's going to be 1,900 square feet. It actually has a smaller footprint than the existing building on the property. It meets most or all of the conditions except for the couple of variances that we require. So I won't rerun through these all because we've established that we can put a smaller facility in here, which will look a lot better. The overhead map, again, this is just the footprint. I think Carrie covered this all pretty well. So what we're requesting is this conditional use permit, the variance to not have windows for security concerns. I'll talk a little bit about that, and then we can talk a little bit about the materials. So the no windows is important because this is, a pretty highly secure facility. It requires a significant level of security, fire suppression. The building has to be very, very safe and secure. The reason for no windows, technically it's an unmanned facility. We will have people show up there periodically, every day probably. There could be crews of 2 to 4 people that show up. They'll work out of it for a couple hours here or there, but it'll be lightly used. So one of the reasons to not have windows. But the more important is it would be very problematic if anything were to happen inside the facility. There's not necessarily anything of tremendous value to people, but if there were vandalism or if something else happened, if something went through the window, rocks, if whatever, we're trying to protect the building from a lot of things because it would take a significant amount of effort to repair things in the building, which could lead to days and weeks of no internet service for those people impacted if there were someone to get in the building, vandalize, do things inside the building. So that's why the security is so important to us. That's why not having windows is very important to us as well. I know there were questions on the materials. I am not an expert on the materials, so we would maybe have to follow up on what the particular stone is and things like that. Unless, Jason, if you know any real details about the materials?
So the materials that we chose for this project
Oh.
I can step here, sir.
Oh.
The materials that we chose for this project actually came after some very good conversations with Carrie, where we looked at other projects that have gone on in this area. If you look at some of the other buildings that are planned for construction in that area or already have been, are using some of the same materials. We're not that far away from one of your shining stars right here, 50th in France. If you look at that EPA structure there, that's the same structures that we're taking. We've borrowed very heavily from that architectural design, from that exterior design aspect as well. Our color patterns and the substance that we chose are to try to stay in keeping with the other projects that the city of Edina has done elsewhere, along with what we understand is the projects that are coming in the future for that specific area. Our intention is that while it might look like it's a little standoffish at the moment, with our understanding of future projects for that area, this will blend in much more than in some of the other materials that we've looked at. With that in mind, we're willing to change that. We're trying to actually accommodate blending this facility in more than making it stand out. That was the reason for those choices. And if you look, those choices are almost identical to the 5th and France project, as well as some of the other future projects that are planned for that area.
Yeah, I mean, we basically want this building to become anonymous, right? We want it to be low visibility. Oh, sorry. We want it to be low visibility. Structures like this, even in other neighborhoods, after a short period of time, they seemingly go unnoticed. So that's the intent.
And again, it's security through obscurity. If you don't know we're there, then you don't know how to get in. And I'd like to just kind of reiterate a little tiny bit on the security aspect. Right now, everybody's well aware that there's lots of bad actors that would love to have the opportunity to get into a facility where they could tie directly in to the world's fiber backbone, because that's exactly what this facility does. And so for us, security is absolute first and foremost, that we try to create as many hard surfaces between our vulnerable areas as possible. If we put a window there, then we're gonna try to expand that building to put an additional hard wall between that window, and then the building just gets too big for us. It becomes unfeasible on that lot. So that's why we've taken a lot of the designs that we've taken right now, is to keep that facility secure, give us that hard wall between our vulnerable portions and where someone could actually have an opportunity to try to breach that security.
Great, thanks, Jason. I believe, yeah. Are there questions?
Yes, I have a question. Which building at 50th and France has? You were talking about a building on 50th and France that had. I think the majority of them are brick.
You are correct. You are correct. If you look at that first 6 feet, for a good portion of that, there's brick or natural stone, and then above that is hard surface ephes or a structure that's similar to that.
Yeah.
And then we use architectural detail to give it, kind of a very pleasing aesthetic.
The one example you had of the smaller building had brick on that one, and the brick has a very regular pattern. I'm just wondering about the cultured stone. I don't and sorry, it's just maybe me being an architect. The cultured stone has a different feel to me than a real stone or a man-made brick does. And I just have a question on that material. The ephes is used all over. I mean, it's used on the target down there, which I think looks great. It has that band like you have here and the ephes up above. So I'm just questioning the use of the cultured stone, really, and not the ephes at all, or not the two different ones at all. And the other question I had was about the lights. There was no talk about it in the packet, but the lights are obviously for security at night, right?
Go ahead.
Sorry. Yes, a portion of that, but also because we have the walkways that are both to the east along the boulevard there, and then that new walkway that we're putting in, we decided that the additional lights would also be in keeping with the neighborhood. If you go slightly south of where we're at right now, there are some, and I think they're constructed out of cultured stone and ephes, that have lights along the walkway there. So it was continuing that design architecture through to our building to provide lights for that sidewalk area for both the north and the south, and also light the building. With the recesses, it causes a shadow line as well, which sort of breaks up the blockiness of the building. That was that recommendation from our designers. I'd like to take credit for that, but I can't.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't mind it because I think it'll enliven the building a bit, just as long as, right, it looks like they're just shining down and they won't shine beyond the property.
Correct.
Yeah. And then my other question was about the walkway, which you had as well. Like right now, the walkway just ends at the property line. It feels a little odd to me.
Yes, ma'am. It was my understanding that there was a planned development that's in the works for the the west side of that building, and so we tried to incorporate during this so it could continue on for that development later. I can't speak to that development, but when we heard that was going to be on the books, then we figured we'd do our best to incorporate. Like I said, we're trying to make this disappear and seem like it's part of, like it's always been there, where it's part of a larger development for the housing or for the shopping centers or whatever is going to be going in as part of that project.
Could it be just because we don't know necessarily what's going on? Do we know what's going on next to it? Would it be possible to kind of plan for the sidewalk? Because it's a nice thing. Go ahead, Carrie.
It's a sidewalk plan for the future, really. As development comes, we take the opportunity to put that infrastructure in now. As it's going to be built, if it's going to be built, it will go to nowhere, certainly. The property to the south where we have an easement, it is a little bit further south. So really to connect it, we may have to work with that property that's straight to the west.
And that's what I'm wondering, if there could be a little bit more thought or planning, or maybe the sidewalk is finished later.
Yeah, we could certainly do that, and maybe that sidewalk needs to curve a little more and come to the south to avoid, because right now it looks like it runs straight in to the adjacent building, where the reality is where we have that easement, if the sidewalk pointed down toward that area, might be more effective.
Okay.
Any other questions, Planning Commission? Yes, Commissioner Padilla.
Yeah, I have a few questions. First, I need to kind of go back to the beginning and understand your business a little bit. So are you an alternative provider to Comcast and things like that? So somebody that had an antenna would, or who chose not to have cable, or they would go with you?
Correct.
Okay. And then in the building, what we saw looked like a bunch of servers, and you would have to do all this cable underground in order to connect?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, and then when you're considering the amount of space and equipment and everything that you need, are you considering the future growth that we're all discussing and considering in that area and in Southdale and in the rest of that part of Edina?
Yes.
So you have, your capacity goes far into the future?
We have crazy capacity in a couple of different ways, which is a benefit.
Okay,
so,
but
yes,
you've considered that.
Yes.
And I admire and appreciate the amount of trees that you plan on installing, which is more than is required. And I imagine that's also to help make the building invisible and unnoticed. And I just wondered why you weren't committing to using gray water for there's significant watering needs for all those trees.
I guess it just wasn't considered. Didn't think of it. So.
Okay, well, I think that would be,
yeah. Well, we're not going to produce much water. I mean, we're not.
No, but you're going to use it.
Yeah,
I know you're not going to produce. I mean, you're going to use it in terms of the outside, not inside the building.
I apologize. We did look at some of the unfortunate part is because it's an unmanned facility. We won't generate enough for it we'd have, no matter what, we're going to have to look at another alternative to gray water, and we're just not going to. We're not going to generate any. It's
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I meant by that, because we're just not using water in the building.
And then in terms of your point about it won't be manned, I mean, I assume it'll be manned electronically.
Oh, yeah,
It'll be
it's
And remotely,
monitored
24 hours a day,
maintained
and all
24
of that.
hours a day.
And last question, have you considered other sites in Edina? I mean, because you mentioned, I
Absolutely.
think, in the literature that this was going to serve the southern part of Edina?
All of Edina.
All of Edina. Okay, so have you considered any other sites in Edina?
Absolutely. We searched all over for sites in Edina. Matter of fact, if we looked at that map, you could see it's basically almost sitting on the border. That's far from ideal for us. We would like to be centralized in an area. But that was the best lot that we could find to serve the needs. So it's not an ideal lot, but it's the best lot that we could find.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
I think it's important to understand that because of the longevity of fiber, this is a 100-year commitment, that that we can't look for leasing through somebody. We have to build our building and own our building so that we control our future and we can control how that product is actually delivered to the public. And a lease is not an option for us at all. It has to be an owned facility. Like I said, it's a 100-year commitment from us to do this project.
Other questions? Sure.
Thank you for your patience, and I do appreciate the amount of trees too. And your question brought up another one, because you don't have that outdoor landscaping watering system include a water sensor. Do you have a plan for watering the vegetation?
No, ma'am.
Do you have a plan for?
Currently, no, but if so, in the interest of, we looked at the gray water, we looked at the landscaping that we've put forward, we believe can be naturally supported, and we're increasing the green space of our area instead of reducing the green space. And so, if you look, I think we've got all of the surveys in there as well for runoff and everything else that shows that everything that we're leaving everything that we possibly can on site and only adding things that we believe can be naturally taken care of through just. We're trying to keep it as natural as possible. Yeah.
Thank you. Other questions? Yeah.
I'm just curious, what are some things that you guys are doing currently for security? Because I looked at the house that you guys have right now, and it does have a fair amount of windows, kind of like just like a residential home would have. So I was just wondering,
Which property are you talking about?
What the current one?
The Xerxes property.
Yeah, it has like windows, right?
It does.
Oh, yes, the property that's there today.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
I will tell you, we have a small security system in there right now to keep an eye on it, and we do daily walkthroughs. But it's not a manned facility right now. Technically it's a vacant building. We're just doing spot checks on it weekly, and we've put a small amount of security to keep an eye on it.
Thank you. Other questions? Yes.
Actually had one for Carrie and then I think one for, Carrie, is it possible to build a utility structure like this anywhere in Edina with no windows without needing a variance?
It would be in a property that's zoned for single-family residential.
Okay. And then for you guys, two questions more directed to the actual variance. One, just a curiosity, why is it, just so I can understand, why is it not possible to build a structure that has windows that are secure? I mean, why is it true that putting a window on a structure necessarily makes it unsecure?
Well, it's a penetration. Okay.
Yeah, may I?
Sure.
It does not. To your point, we could put windows on it, and we could absolutely like we've done in other locations where we put film on them or things that make it more difficult to break through. The problem is that for our switching room, where the majority of our critical infrastructure is, that it's standard practice to have 2 hard walls between that equipment and the outside. Unfortunately, the small size of the site that we've found doesn't allow me to put a hall windows plus the necessary by zone. I think it's 5 feet to the next wall,
Yeah.
and then have enough room to create another secondary hard wall from that internal wall to the wall for the switch room. And so really, in this case, it's just a matter of the lot size. Could we? Yes. But we need a variance then to increase the footprint of our building, because we can't create that security buffer zone and keep to code.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Is this project that's proposed going to have 2 hard walls?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And then you also mentioned that we were looking at some of the renderings.
Wait, let me take that.
Yeah.
I want to take that back. No,
Okay.
Because we're trying to keep this footprint as small as possible. The outside wall for the switch area, there's a portion on the east and west side and the north that will only have a single wall. But we've also that's the reason that we need the brick. If you wanted to add a window there, now I've got to put a secondary wall there, and I can't.
Okay. And then we were looking at a couple of the renderings in the presentation, and we flipped through them because I think some of the plans for the design of the building have changed. And I think you said something like it'll look different or look better or something like that.
Well, it's more compact.
Yeah. Well, so how would it look? So how is the building as you're planning to build it now? How would it look different than the renderings?
Well, it's really in height.
Okay.
So the building in these renderings was at 26 feet.
All right.
And then just for comparison, we're just now talking about doing it closer to 20 feet. This building is at 18 feet. So you can see the scale, it's much more compact, much shorter, which I think would address a lot of the concerns about the public comments about the size of the building.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Can you go back to your illustration of the drawing, please?
Sure.
So a fewill things. So I guess one thing that stood out to me, on top of the roof, it looks like those are air conditioning units.
Correct.
I assume. Will those be blended in any way?
I don't know if you can tell from there, but they're actually encased in a blanking the word now. So it's a louvered system, so that it's actually the units themselves are screened completely.
Yeah.
And that also helps reduce the noise of them as well considerably.
Okay. Yeah, that got to my second part, was the noise emitted from the
Noise
air conditioning units.
is a huge, like the one that he's pulled up before in Snelling. That's right next door. I mean, we're right on the edge of our variances there as well with residential units, and so we've learned to attenuate our sound. So our generator enclosures are designed specifically to help with that. We use baffles within the generator itself. It has mufflers on it. Our AC units on the roof are baffled as well. That we try really hard to disappear as much as we possibly can.
And then I noticed it looks like there's black security fencing around part of it, or is that,
There's an ornate fence that runs on the south side of that sidewalk that goes to the north. That's literally just as a pedestrian deterrent. It's not meant as a security feature whatsoever. It's meant just to, if you're walking down the sidewalk, to just create a natural barrier there to keep people away from the building a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, what I didn't want to see was, I think of there's a big server farm on Lone Oak Road, like in Egan, for example, and it's a big security fence, curved over, sharp. I was hoping that wasn't anything like that, so that's
also why we went with the black metal. It tends to disappear to the eye when you're walking past it, or at least it's ornate.
And it hides the barbed wire.
And then I guess just a general question, do you have a coverage map, what your coverage map will look like with this installation?
No, but essentially, I mean, the plan is to build out all of Edina in the next 3 to 4 years. So, I mean, we should just really fill in this whole blue section here.
This facility gives us the ability to light all of that blue area up, but we would, just like if you look at the other COs and you can see how we bleed over, there'll be bleed over from this as well. But this facility, with where it sits right now, it's majority going to be Edina.
Okay. So how many more additional facilities would you need to cover that entire blue area?
No, this will cover the entire.
That will cover the entire.
This will cover the entire area.
I
Yep.
misunderstood. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Yep, Commissioner Smith.
All right. Is it possible to operate this building at 16 feet?
Not presently, no.
So you mostly be 18 feet?
Yeah, I mean, it helps with the cooling, it helps with a number of factors. Things change technology-wise, you guys see it from year to year to year. Densities increase, which increases heat and all sorts of things, so
Gotcha.
we need a little bit of extra space.
The idea of making the building invisible, I like that idea. So you're saying with the design right now, over time, no one's going to notice it. Is it possible to even paint it a different color, something like that? How could that be more invisible from you guys' perspective?
Well, that could go two ways, right? I mean, we could sort of camouflage it in. I don't know if that would help or not. I think what we're trying to do is follow the guidelines from the planning committee, and maybe, maybe I misunderstand that, but we're trying to make it look like the other properties in the area so that it does blend in well, and hide it behind the landscaping and things like that. I mean, we're fine with exploring other colors if people felt like that was the right way to go. It doesn't really matter to us what the color is, I guess.
I guess we did our best to try to anticipate what you'd like. And we took a lot of input. We've had a lot of really good conversations with Carrie, and so that's where we're at right now. If we made the decision that we needed to modify the exterior, I don't see that being a problem. Really, the structure of the building is what we need. Exterior, within reason, obviously.
Gotcha.
There are some things that we take into consideration with our exterior, which are we want to reflect some heat. It's about heat dissipation. It's about noise attenuation. So some of the things that we've chosen, we've learned help with that, and so with that in mind, and with Carrie's help, we sort of tried to make sure that we're meeting the general feel of what Edina wants for that area.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Just so we're clear on that, staff's recommendation was for an all-brick building, brick or stone, to meet the standards. The compromise that they're proposing is the 8-foot band around the building.
Any other questions?
A comment.
Okay.
City Hall here has the stone band around the bottom with the metal on top. The color kind of looks like that. It's just the materials. Whereas, it's a stone veneer out here. I'm pretty sure it's not. It's just the cultured stone. Because you're putting this right over a CMU block, right? So you've got to find something that you put right over a CMU block. I mean, which you could do a brick as well. I like the two colors. I like the renderings, and I can imagine in the renderings it being 4 feet shorter. So I like those. It's just the reality of the cultured stone. That's all. Because if you say stone or brick, I think of real stone, which might be out of your budget, but I don't know if brick would be. I think there's other things in that.
Do we have any other questions? All right, I got a couple. First one's for Carrie. So the neighboring site to the south and west, that's part of a PUD, correct?
The site directly to the south is that little insurance agency.
Yeah, the blue home thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Then the larger office building, that is part of the PUD. That's intended to be phase 2 of that residential project.
Okay, thank you. I guess my next question, how long have you guys owned the site?
It's not, what is it? It's 6 months, 8 months?
So pretty quickly?
February 23rd, 2022.
All right. Yes, you mentioned question about ownership and commitment, 100-year commitment, and that's why you want to own. I guess, have you been approached to combine this into another project but still own a piece of that property, say PUD? I mean, you're on the corner of some prime real estate that's at the gateway of Southdale, so it's a very important site for us as a community, and that's what it's guided for. So have you guys been approached or approached others to be a little more collaborative potentially or not?
No, we haven't been approached.
I guess that's the only question I got. I got comments later, but any other questions from planning commissioners? Thank you, guys.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah, now is the portion of the public hearing. So again, we'll now hear again from residents who'd like to provide testimony. To participate, call in now. Info should be on the screen, but 786-496-5601 and enter conference pin 761-3141 pound. Then push *1 to enter the queue. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. Please state your full name and address, and we'll let you know if you go over the 3 minutes. Before we get to the callers, we will welcome anyone who is here in person that would like to come forward and provide some testimony. Again, please state your full name and address. You got 3 minutes.
I'd like to have them change the picture on here. It would make it easier for you to understand what my question.
Do you have a photo that you brought with you?
No, the photo on here where it shows the current neighborhood. Where it showed like the current building and
Like that?
the area behind it.
Is it slide 13?
This one?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, that's good enough.
So I'll need you to go to one of the podiums and state your full name and address, and you got 3 minutes.
Linda Schmitz. I live at 6483 Berry Road, and I've lived there since '94, so that's how long I've lived there. I was there when they built the apartment building and stuff, and part of a question is that there's the area back here that belongs to the new apartment that was built, that's a parking lot, and then there's a condominium next to it, and there's been talk about a road going through from 65th Street to Berry Road to go to the hospital, and if they ever do that, that's gonna mess up, you're gonna mess up because there's no room between that parking lot and that other apartment building, and then it has to take down a daycare, and it would affect the part where I live, which would, what are you gonna do, take out some people's garages? But, and I'm not sure about the sidewalk that they were talking about, how that's gonna totally fit, because it would have to run adjacent to another condo that's back over here. Or I don't know if it's a condo, but it's an apartment building that's over there that has a dog walk and stuff. So I'm not sure where that sidewalk would technically go. And I've also noticed, back on the north side of this building, there's twin homes or whatever they are, and they have access to their homes through on 64th Street. There's a road that comes back there, and I've seen where it almost looks like they plowed from wherever their alley or whatever they want to call it is over onto the back side of the building here. And so I don't know how people have been using it over this winter, but it's just, as long as they make it so it looks presentable, and maybe they want to take and look at the apartment building that was built and maybe incorporate some of how that looks to how their new building might look. Because at least then it would blend in with the area, with the buildings that are going up new. Because I'm assuming, and I know that this building was just refurbed because they said it was going to cost too much to do it at the time. And at the time, it was going to be the insurance building and the audiology building were also going to go. So when I heard that these guys were having it, was like, oh, okay, they changed the whole plan. So, so then, because I know that the current office building and the insurance building were going to be torn down for also for apartments or small apartments, but it was supposed to be smaller, shorter than the one that was built. And I guess I just want it to, you know, to be feasible for the neighborhood and for them, you know, but I want, you know, need it to blend in, especially since you're building it next to houses.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. Do we have anyone else who is here to provide testimony for the public hearing? Bueller? No? All right. Let's go to the call-in line. Do we have anyone in the queue?
We do. We have someone ready to speak right now. Operator, can you please unmute their line? And just a reminder to the caller to please state your full name and address. Thank you.
Hello, this is Patrick McDougall at 3250 West 66, number 637. In addition to my comments that I left on Better Together Edina, I just had one other that I thought of while watching this. It's pertaining to the north sidewalk. I think adding pedestrian access is great. This question is maybe less about the conditional use permit and the variance, but more about encouraging pedestrian. Right now, the existing pedestrian facilities encourage people to walk north and south toward kind of controlled intersections. This new sidewalk and whatever future plans there might be to connect to it on the west side is probably going to encourage some east-west pedestrian travel, and that kind of leads people to a very dangerous place to be crossing to the different like restaurants in the kind of business area right across the street, right across York Xerxes. So just wanted to like check in if there's a good way for us to petition the county to have a safe pedestrian access in that east-west direction across Xerxes. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else in the queue ready to speak?
We do not. So we are safe to proceed.
Okay, with that, I will welcome a motion to close the public hearing.
Move to close the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
So moved. Public hearing is closed. Now we will take it back to the Planning Commission to deliberate. Open it to fellow commissioners who'd like to say something. Commissioner Miranda.
Two quick questions for, I guess, for Carrie is to the last speaker's point. I mean, is there anything the city has thought about in terms of having like a protected crossing there or anything?
I'm not sure in terms of requiring something from this project. It's probably a separate discussion that we could ask our city engineer.
Sure, right. I was just wondering if there's anything in any plans or anything.
Not that I'm aware of. But.
Okay, thanks. And then in terms of them wanting to make this building anonymous, is there any thought? I mean, because at the corner there's a big sign, welcome to Edina, welcome to Southdale, whatever. Are there other plans for anything the city wants to do in terms of signage or landscaping or anything that would help hide the building?
Yeah, nothing was contemplated in any of those studies about signage up here. That said, there is that big triangular existing pylon that sits there. I'm not sure what they're planning to do with that, but with the change out of the sidewalk, that sidewalk will come closer to that sign. Probably isn't going to impact it, but that might be an opportunity.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments? Yeah, Commissioner Strauss.
Well, I don't really have anything new. I mean, it seems to hit three important things. One, I think the landscaping as it's shown is absolutely makes it a desirable project. I think it's going to look so much better than the existing situation. I think it's in the right place. I mean, just there's a lot of stuff happening, and it seems, one, it's important, it's an important development in the right place. And I think they committed to making it fit right. So, yeah, it seems to work in all those levels for me. Thank you.
Other comments, please? Yeah, Commissioner Smith.
Yeah, this is just a question for Carrie. The triangular pylon, I was going to ask about that. What is that? Do you know?
That was the sign for the audiology clinic.
Okay, so that could be removed and that wouldn't have any impact on the building or the functionality
Right.
at all. And with regards to the sidewalk, is this something that if the developer is going to develop the building now, it just makes economic sense just to work on that sidewalk now? Or could it be something that could be worked on later once there's a more comprehensive design for how that sidewalk would connect to other roads and streets going westward?
Yeah, we typically like to get them in now. It becomes a who knows when development's going to happen to the south. So it's pretty standard for us to require the sidewalk to be changed out at this time.
Gotcha. The only comment I have on that sidewalk is I'm wondering if it's just going to attract folks to go there and have issues crossing Xerxes, or because it's a road that's not really will be going anywhere, if it's just going to be a nuisance rather than something that would give us real functionality, in the near term.
In terms of that sidewalk on the east-west sidewalk?
Correct.
Yeah, so that one, as I mentioned, it's going to lead right to the adjacent apartment complex to the west. For one like that, it would be possible to, perhaps they could dedicate an easement to the city for future construction. That would probably be the most effective way where, it's easier to keep track of, that it's a dedicated easement to the city, and maybe we could create an arrangement that it's paid for by that property owner when it's ready to be installed. I think in terms of the one on Xerxes, we would like to see that one done at this time.
You good? All right. Other comments, please? Yeah.
Yeah, I agree on the sidewalk. I mean, I think there needs to be there before it's kind of figured out. I agree with your comments earlier and McDougall calling in. I mean, the more sidewalks, the better. You just want a purpose for them. So I'm wondering if parts of that could be worked out later, or even on, is the property to the north of that, the residents to the north. I don't know if they've been consulted on that sidewalk and having people walk. It'd be on this property, but right next to their property. So I was looking at the site and seeing if it could be, if there's only one vehicle showing up on a daily basis, if the sidewalk can even be on the other side of the building. And I know that's through the parking lot and it's a shared driveway, but if it could feed into that other parking lot a little bit differently. So I think there just has to be more thought on that sidewalk. And then my only other comment is I'd recommend looking at other materials for that lower band.
Thanks. So a couple of thoughts on that. You could add a condition as part of your recommendation that east-west sidewalk not be constructed, rather an easement be dedicated to the city. And then you could also add a condition in regard to the material. Could be either, if the 8-foot band is acceptable, or deny the variance, which would require them to be all stone or brick on the north and east side of the building.
Other comments, please? Are you done? Or yeah? Commissioner Padilla.
My concerns are just geographic. I think it's terrific for Edina to have more and better internet options. I just wonder about the specific location. It puts us kind of in a conundrum. If the zoning, it has to be where there's one-story residential, but everybody is kind of put off, or there's some people that are put off by the lack of windows. So it has to be in a residential neighborhood, and I'm just wondering if this is the right neighborhood. I'm thinking about like either side of the former Fred Richards golf course or something down there. One, because it's a lot of low-level industrial, but it would need a variance. But there's also on the north side of the former golf course, there's lots of just single-family houses there where this would really be hidden away. But also because it seems like there's a lot of other places in very close proximity to this that are kind of ripe for redevelopment in the future. And if this is a 100-year commitment, 5, 10, 20 years down the road, we're looking at, a half a block one way or the other, or some other redevelopment up on 64th or 65th, that, and then all of a sudden this becomes an impediment to future redevelopment in the area. So kind of two minds.
Commissioner Miranda, please.
So because this is in the Southdale area, I tend to want to hew to the Southdale guidelines. And the two things that really strike me in terms of that are, one, the things people have talked about. One, the sidewalk, and two, the height of the building and the coverage of the building. So in terms of the sidewalk, I guess I'm of the opinion that, if you build it now, it's easier. It's there. It's something people expect to be completed as the adjoining properties redevelop. And even though it goes nowhere today, I think it's useful that it sets a precedent that something's going to go there. So I do think it would need to curve down, as Gary says, not go into the building adjacent to it, but rather curve around the property and go where it would presumably connect with something going further west. So I'm a fan of keeping the sidewalk in, but adjusting where it connects. In terms of the height and scale and materials on the building, the reason, my understanding of the Southdale guidelines is that the 20-foot height is set so that there's a consistent first story everywhere. And that's especially in most areas of the Southdale district, that's where you're going to have continuous buildings where buildings touch each other. And so in this case, we have kind of a unique circumstance where this building is kind of its own building. And I see the rationale for not having windows, so I can accept that. And the other thing with that 20-foot initial story is that because we require 75% windows, it would be mostly windows. So because this isn't mostly windows, I think I agree with the neighbors that this is like something you don't want 20 feet. Did I say 20 stories? 20 feet high. So I think the shorter height makes more sense in this particular, as an exception. In this particular instance, because it is a small building isolated from other buildings, there's no potential for expanding it vertically or anything. And so I do think the shorter height makes sense. And then in terms of the surface materials that are shown in the diagram, I think I'm fine with that. So,
looking this way, any comments? All right, please, thanks.
Yeah, real quick. I probably should ask this as a question, but it just kind of looked at the rendering again. One thing folks like about this is the landscaping. They think it looks good and will kind of hide the building a little bit, right? I'm looking at the rendering again, and then there's 3 street trees that presumably would be added, because I don't see them in the photograph. 2 other, maybe 4, I don't know, 5 trees along the north side of the property, 8 oak trees added to the south, and then 7 ornamental trees along the east side of the building, without a plan to water them. So I think we all know we've talked a lot about this in other forums. These trees won't probably work if they're not watered. So can we add a condition, or otherwise, have staff work with the property owner to ensure that the landscaping that people actually becomes a reality, and instead of having all these trees die? It's just an idea, but it's something that I thought would bring to life your vision and actually make sure it happens. It's just a discussion. Yeah.
Yes, we could add a condition just to make it clear that it gets filed, the conditional use permit, the resolution gets filed on the property, to state specifically that the applicant is responsible for maintenance of all that landscaping, and in the case of something dying, they have to replace it. That would certainly be an acceptable condition that we could add.
Okay.
Good. All right. Other comments?
So no questions, really, just contributing to the discussion, I guess. Really, I agree with what Commissioner Miranda said about the sidewalk, right? So it's a very popular sidewalk, obviously. But if we don't build things initially, right, it becomes that much harder to build later, right? Really, we're putting together a puzzle, and unfortunately, those puzzle pieces all get placed at very different times, right? And putting sidewalk, through 5 lots at once versus 1 lot at a time is going to be a much easier thing to do, right? We see that with mass transit, we see with subway systems, et cetera, throughout our cities. So I like the sidewalk, just like Commissioner Miranda does. I do agree as far as the landscaping goes, right? I would be concerned that it wouldn't be initially maintained, right? I mean, the trees, once I think they reach a certain maturity and growth, right, wouldn't require as much maintenance, but I think in the initial stages, there'd have to be a commitment to make sure that they reach that maturity, right? I don't have to water my big oak tree in my backyard anymore. It gets enough, but in the initial stages, it needed some care and maintenance. So I'd like to see something placed around that. Yeah, and I guess that's pretty much it. So,
Thank you. All right, I have some comments myself. First, I do have a question, follow up to Carrie. I looked back at the zoning map. It says the south to the site is part of a PUD. That's not correct?
It was incorporated into that PUD from my recollection, but no plan for development of it specifically. It was just part of that project.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm going to diverge quite a bit from fellow commissioners and kind of align more with Commissioner Padilla. I am a huge supporter of your business and what you're doing, and had a lot of friends with using your service in Minneapolis, and I was pretty jealous. I wonder when I'd come to Edina. So totally in favor, but I personally think this is the wrong site for Edina. And it goes back to I'm looking at our comprehensive plan. This specific site is guided for a community activity center. And if you look what's around it, this could be part of a bigger development that could house a lot of people, provide affordable housing. And if we do this and build it and commit to 100 years there, it will be an impediment to what could happen there. And we had a similar project come before us nearby where a bank was proposing a much smaller footprint for what they could do on a site right at a gateway of an area. And this is right at the gateway of the Southdale area from Xerxes. It's the first site that's zoned to be community activity center. So while I agree that it conforms to meeting, I guess, the conditions that staff listed out, the last one is it consistent with the comprehensive plan? And the condition for that is utility buildings can be conditionally permitted anywhere. So that's how it jives with the comprehensive plan. But if you look at what ought to go here, we are selling ourselves way short. So I can see how this benefits you guys a lot, because while you could go anywhere in Edina, this is an expensive site that you purchased and it wasn't cheap, but it's close to the most density where you're going to have the most return on this investment to balance that out. But there are other sites that could be used. The site you referenced in Minneapolis and showed the picture of, that's in like a residential area kind of hidden away, and this is right at the gateway of Southdale. So for me, I won't try to get lost in the details. I can't even go to the details because fundamentally I think this is the wrong site because it doesn't align with our comprehensive plan. And that's just kind of where I'm at. And there's been times where I feel strongly about something and the vote goes other direction. So I want to put in some food for thought if this does get approved. And that is, on the sustainability side, this building needs power, so I'd suggest having solar up top to help offset the burden on the building. Windows, we've done false windows on other projects by residential areas, so even if you have a wall, if it's investing in a wall or something behind it, that even if you penetrated the wall, there's another wall, we should do that to make this look more inviting. Then I started laughing when the sign, let's just turn this building into the sign. But no, I really would be willing to accept other variances to make this into like a different type of camouflage, because it really is at the front of Southdale. People are coming in, this is welcome to Southdale. But fundamentally, I can't accept this conditional use permit on grounds of it doesn't align with the comprehensive plan. Yeah, Commissioner Miranda.
Yeah, so I thought about that too, and I had concerns about that. But I guess what switched my opinion is that it's adjacent to a series of houses or duplexes that, as far as we know, they're all individually owned. So there's not a huge probability that they're going to be redeveloped in mass or anything, right? So it's a continuation of what's already there, which is why, I totally see what you say. And if this were isolated and there were completely different things on either side, I'd completely agree with you. But I think it feels so much like what's literally adjacent to it, and there's a bunch of them, there's not just one or two. So it feels to me like it becomes invisible, I guess is how I'll go. Other than if we wanted to have signage or something there, but anyway, that's...
Yeah, no, and I guess that was my question about collaboration, because if the site to the south is part of a PUD, couldn't all of this become part of it? So you're really using such a sliver of the site for this building, and the rest of it is actually usable, livable space, because again, what this could be guided for. Comprehensive plan-wise, even the sites north and to the west are all high-density residential, so it's not what it is today, but what we're expecting it to go toward. So again, this 100-year commitment is just a big problem to me, where you're building over a building in the future. Why couldn't this be part of something else or just located elsewhere to make way for something bigger? I guess that's just where I'm at. But welcome a motion or other comments.
I think I would agree with you more if it was a larger area of land. So I'd hit in on what you said is it's a sliver of that corner, right? So there's plenty of development going on around there, and this does serve that community very well to bring that access to, like you said, fiber internet to a community that would like other options, I think, than the current monopoly that exists there, right? So there's things to consider in that regard. If it were 2 lots big, 3 lots big, 10 feet higher, I'd have a lot more concerns. I do think I'm certainly open to suggestions around the building materials, fake windows, trying to make it blend in a little bit more rather than just have this block, right? But I think the size of it is probably what makes me feel a little bit better about it, that it's not a massive, it's not taking up a ridiculous amount of space that could be further developed. So.
One question I have for Director Teague, the site to the south, which is an equal sliver that's part of a bigger project, was this ever in contention to try to be captured with that?
Yeah, my recollection was the developer at that time approached both property owners, but the audiology clinic was going pretty strong at that time and they weren't interested in selling.
And so that's kind of where, even though this is a smaller site, most of the time when we have smaller sites in prime areas, there's a better opportunity to bundle parcels. 50th in France, the only reason it happened was because someone waited a while to assemble all the properties versus build something now. So I just see this as we shoot ourselves in the foot a little bit with what could be there. But again, I think adding windows, we've done it before where we have them and yeah, there's a wall behind it or something for protection, but at least it'd blend into the neighbors a little better. I'd welcome suggestions on that too.
Yeah.
Discussion.
I have strong opinions. Well, that's kind of a bugaboo of mine too, is that, we require 75% transparency and, or not even transparent, 75% windows. And half the time, there's, Walgreens, for example, there's plastic material on it. And then even if not, there's, cases behind it and, but it even there are places in my neighborhood at 44th and France, so on both sides of France Avenue where, so counting Minneapolis too, but there were two hair salons, and they both, one of them did it better than the other, where on the Edina side it's better, where it's slightly tinted but not too bad. But on the other side it was very heavily tinted, so you basically couldn't look in the windows, in which case, I just don't see, when I walk past that, it might as well be a wall. I just don't understand. The idea behind windows is not that we love glass, it's that you see activity on the other side. So even if it were 100% transparent and you saw an interior wall, again, I just don't see what that's really bringing to the idea. I'd rather have, these buildings exist, right? They showed the example in Minneapolis or wherever it was. And these buildings exist. They're not, icons of the neighborhood or anything, but, if you can make them look decent, I think it's, and the cultured stone and whatever, I think is fine. So if you're going to put glass in and you're going to require it, it needs to have a purpose, I guess, is what I feel.
Any other comments? Motions? Neither? Someone.
I move to approve the conditional use permit subject to staff requirements, and also, let's see, what do we do? The lower height, 16 feet or whatever, and the sidewalk curving, and the replacing any trees that aren't taken care of.
The permanent maintenance of the landscaping.
Yeah.
And I believe I heard the applicant talk about 18 feet as opposed to 16, so I don't know how we want to, building not to exceed 20 feet, but acceptable below, something to that effect? Or do we want to put a specific number on it?
Well, if they said 18, I wouldn't want to go any higher than that. When we said 16, was that interior height or exterior height? Why the 16, 18 variance? I guess I'm a little confused.
That was what was conveyed to me on the phone this afternoon, was 16 feet, but I heard 18 this evening, so that's why I wanted to clarify.
It's confusing because we're talking about interior height and exterior height, two conversations. The building I showed you was 18 feet.
Can you step up to that?
The building I showed you was 18 feet exterior height, and what we were talking about today was 20 feet exterior height, so it was around 16 feet interior height. So that's where this discrepancy between 18 or 16 and 20 is coming. We could probably make 18 work. It's not maybe as ideal. So if we did up to 20, see what happens.
It's the exterior that we want to focus on, the exterior height. And 18 exterior height is acceptable.
Because it says top of parapet 126 feet 0 right now.
The original plans, yes, were 26 feet.
And we're saying you can take off 6 feet and make it 118?
Yes. So exterior height not to exceed 18 feet.
Is that the motion, Lou, or would you like to?
I will second.
Can do all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Can we do a roll call? Let's redo that. Again, this is to support the motion that was just made and seconded. And aye is approving.
Commissioner Padilla.
Nay.
Commissioner Miranda.
Aye.
Commissioner Felt.
Nay.
Commissioner
Nay.
Smith.
Nay.
Commissioner Bernstein.
I pronounce it Bornstein. Aye.
Sorry.
That's fine. Just a spelling thing.
I'm sorry, what was your motion, your vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Strauss.
Aye.
Commissioner Day.
Aye.
Chair Bennett.
Nay.
4-4.
So do conditional use permits go to the council? Okay.
They go to the council
So this will
no matter
still
what.
go to the council, but the vote stands at a 4-4 push. Nothing further on our behalf. Good luck with your project. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you for your time.
All right. Well, first night, you're already hitting 9 o'clock. Congratulations on the longevity. I know we have a marathon runner over here, so he's used to it. Anyways, next on the agenda, if I can find it, we move to our reports and recommendations. And this is a sketch plan review for the Community Health and Safety Center at 4401 76th Street West. Director Teague will present, and we have others here who are, I'm guessing you gentlemen in the back, recognize some of you, thank you, to also discuss and support the sketch plan review. And turn it over to you, Commissioner or Planner Teague. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Chair, members of the Commission. So this property is also located in the Greater Southdale District. So you're asked to provide non-binding comments on a potential future development project, what we call the sketch plan review. So no formal action, just provide feedback on the future. So this site is 8 acres in size. It's located on 76th. You can see the large building that's there today. It's a 102,000 square foot building. This building would be removed. Also note that there's a pretty large wetland down in the southwest corner of the site. The site is guided in our comprehensive plan for office residential, has a density range between 20 and 75 units per acre. It's currently zoned planned industrial district. Within the planned industrial district, office buildings and light industrial are permitted uses. Again, site located within the design experience guidelines area. We've had Mick Johnson, our consultant, who put together those plans, has provided a review for you to consider this evening. Specifically, the proposal here is to construct that health and safety building. That would be located on the north third of the site, and that's really the only part of the site that the plans are more developed. That's the site that's most appropriate for the fire station and uses associated with that. The south 2/3 of the site, while there's buildings shown there, there's no preconceived uses within those buildings. It's just kind of illustrative to show the potential for development. So the Planning Commission is asked to comment on potential uses, how this site fits into the area. Most important is the connections that we're making just to the south and east-west to set up future development around the site. There's a couple of options that are presented. The Health and Safety Center is located on the north third of the site in each option, but there's different scenarios for potential development to the south. So again, fire station here, Key element is providing a north-south street through the site to provide development opportunities to the south, as well as an east-west promenade. It could be a pedestrian, bike, could be a street. One option shows more of a street. Option B shows more of that could be pedestrian, could be bike, to provide connections to France and then to the Fred Richards Park. So again, one scenario with a couple of building scenarios. And again, maintaining and taking advantage of that wetland space. So some of the considerations here. So the uses that are contemplated in the comprehensive plan include office, attached or multifamily housing, limited retail, not any big box type retail, limited industrial, institutional uses, so any kind of public buildings, parks and open space. Vertical mixed use is suggested on larger sites, which this is. So commission can have a discussion about potential future uses. Building materials, we just went through this with the last project. We're looking at that brick and stone material, at least on the first floor, and that 75% transparency. Building height, so this site is the height overlay district would allow up to 12 stories on this site. The Community Health and Safety Center is in a range 22 to 27 feet with the training tower that would be 50 to 60 feet. Sustainability, any rezoning to a PUD or however we want to work that out would be subject to the city's sustainability policy. Traffic and parking study would be required, especially just for to determine traffic impacts on the north half facility. In terms of compliance table, the station itself meets all of our required setbacks. Again, we're well within the height. Residential density potential on the site is anywhere from 160 to 600 units, looking at the overall site. So I will stop there. Our development team has a much more detailed presentation to address the design experience guidelines, how this site fits into the area, and the potential for future uses to the south. And there's a lot of options for how that could develop. We want to focus with a formal application on the Health and Safety Center, but there's a lot of options for that south half. It could be platted as an outlot for future development, and we could also set up more of the potential detail for how those additional connections and or building paths could be located on the site. So I will stop there, answer any questions you may have, and be ready for a little more detailed presentation.
Did you want to maybe address or bring up some of Mick Johnson's comments? Or will those be discussed later in a more detail?
Yeah, I can hit the highlights.
Okay, yeah, that'd be helpful.
He had preferred.
Could you also provide context to the new commissioners of who Mick Johnson is?
Yes. Thank you for that. So Mick Johnson was a consultant that was hired to help the city with the planning for the Southdale district. His concentration was on these design experience guidelines. So it's a guiding document that helps us consider future development projects in the Southdale district. And so what he does is provide a review of how a project fits those guidelines. So some of his comments, in general, he liked option B with this one. With the east-west promenade, he liked the more green space, providing those connections for bike and pedestrian, not so much the street running east-south. Another item that he touched on is this north-south street here, suggesting that potentially this could be angled parking for more of that small town feel, Main Street kind of idea along this spine here. In general, he thought that the fire station itself met the street typologies in terms of setback, the 30-foot setback from the street, and is anticipating the building materials meeting those guidelines as well.
Thanks. Any questions? Or, yeah.
Yeah, just a quick question on the fire station. Is it going to be close to this site essentially, or is it? I might have missed that in your presentation.
Oh, sorry. So yes, the health and safety facility, which would include the fire station, would be located up closer to 76th Street.
Gotcha.
So this area right here.
And I think you called out some of the potential uses. So we have the fire station. What else would be in that health and safety building? Like when we think health and safety community, what kind of services or would be provided there?
Yeah, I'll let the chief speak in more detail, but our health department would move into this facility as well.
Gotcha. Just a question before the chief goes and shares his insight. I know we were talking about a Wooner going north-south. Does either of these roads connect to that, or would connect to that in the future?
So the north-south street here would certainly provide a connection for our east-west in whatever form that takes, so whether it's a Wooner for a street or a sidewalk, bike path. The idea is to develop the site in smaller blocks and provide those additional connections, not only to the property to the south, but adjacent properties that touch it as well.
Gotcha. And just one last question on 76th Street. So I know 76th Street does a really right angle turn to go down to Park Lawn Avenue. Is this also proposing that the angle of that street changes, that then connects on to, I guess, 77th?
Yeah, so this project doesn't do that, but as you can see here, I believe this is the turn that you're... So while the plan suggests that might be a possibility, for this to ever happen, it would be with the redevelopment of the Pentagon Park, those existing buildings in the Pentagon Park, the north half of 77th.
Gotcha. All right, thank you.
Other questions, please? Please. No. All right, we can turn it over to, I guess, the other applicant team to give a more thorough presentation. Or?
Yeah, perhaps the chief can expand on the health.
Okay, thank you.
All the uses involved here.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Commissioner Smith, and thank you for letting me be here tonight to help out with this project. I'm Andrew Slama, Fire Chief for Edina Fire. I think the specific question was what services are going to be provided out of this building. The Community Health and Safety Center is going to include the Public Health Department and the Fire Department. So the Fire Department offers ALS ambulance service currently out of both of our fire stations and emergency fire response. Along with our fire response, that includes technical rescue, hazardous material response, any of the emergency response throughout the city of Edina. So this building would replace our current fire station 2. That's too small to serve the demand that we have in that part of town.
Gotcha. And with regards to public health, is there other buildings within the city that does public health? When I think of public health in Edina, it barely touches my mind. I just think just to go to the hospital and, and 60th and France, 62 and France. But I don't think public health. Could you just expand on what public health would mean?
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Smith. The Public Health Division is a division underneath the Fire Department. Edina has its own health board, so we're part of a consortium with the Bloomington Public Health, Edina and Richfield Public Health Departments are part of a consortium that provide public health services to the community here locally. And so our current Public Health Division offers rental inspections, licensing for pools, restaurants, et cetera, throughout the community. So that's what our current Public Health Division does, and then collaborates with our consortium with Bloomington Public Health for services throughout the community.
Thank you.
All right, welcome.
Well, hi, my name is Trace Jacques. I'm a partner and senior designer with BKV Group. I'm the lead designer on this as part of a larger team. We are providing architectural and engineering services for this project. So I'm going to quickly go over a nice thorough presentation that will go and probably answer a lot of the questions about the types of guidelines that we're actually mulling around on this site right now, where the site is. But really, it's meant as a broad overview or an introduction of this project for the Planning Commission. So as Carrie mentioned, we are here for input. We have had a work session with the City Council a week ago. We got great input from them. And as Carrie mentioned, we also have received input from Mick Johnson at the Architectural Field House. Just a quick introduction of myself. I'm actually very familiar with the design guidelines for Southdale. I've worked on several projects over the years. I worked on the Bower, which is behind the Target, Super Target. That was the first actual project to clear the guideline process. So I'm very familiar with it, is my point, and also have worked on several other projects since then. So at any rate, Edina Community Health and Safety Center. This is a wonderful, wonderful project. I got to figure out how to move this. Here we go. I'm just going to scroll through. Edina's ever-evolving community embraces the challenge of reinventing itself in order to better serve all citizens in greater ways. The image on the right is basically a site partie or a site diagram. We are currently here tonight to talk about basically, I wouldn't call it wargaming, I'd call it urban design gaming, where we took a larger site and ran a bunch of scenarios. We provided a packet for you that shows 2 scenarios of dozens. Trust me, there were a lot. But basically what this diagram is showing is the essence of what will be built in step 1 from a program standpoint. As Carrie mentioned, it really only needs about 1/3 of the site, maybe a little less. Okay, it's primarily a fire station. We're relocating the current fire station 2 to this site. It's currently over by the Y, over on Xerxes there, as well as introducing public health components and an opportunity to have a multi-purpose training type space that is very welcoming to the citizens of Edina, and I'll get into that. The mission and purpose is to establish a multi-use municipal landmark that is welcoming to Edina's diverse community and creates connections between the people and the many civic services provided. Community is strength. Be strong. Let's look out for one another. This is a wonderful message. The concept statement is the City of Edina plans to replace the existing Fire Station 2 with a new Community Health and Safety Center that will house the Fire Department and Community Health Department. Tasked with the goal of creating a community landmark that is attractive, accessible, and interactive with the public while accommodating the growing needs of the Fire and Health Department staff, the development serves as a connection point, and that's really important, connection point for the city and community. This project will be a catalyst for implementation of the Southdale design guidelines within this region of the city. Originally, the guidelines were really between France and Xerxes, and more recently, it's extended to the west to Highway 100, and this would be the first project within that district. The project is planned to be 2 stories, include community-focused indoor and outdoor spaces that are flexible, adaptable, and push the boundaries of development and design for buildings. Lofty goals. The big idea, it's really about taking care of each other now, in the future, and on many different levels. One of the mentions that I spoke of is that we're looking for creativity and adaptability within this project to serve more than just those 2 specific functions of public health and fire. So, for instance, one of the ideas floated would be that this could be a voting station, for instance, or a community gathering space. Project pillars. This is going through the sorry, I'm drawing a blank. The Values Viewfinder, sorry. A little senior moment, it's a little late. But the pillars, race and equity, health and all policies, sustainability, community engagement. And it's really, they all come together. It's about community well-being. And really what that is speaking to is a deep public engagement process that we've gone through to date, both at a staff level, city level, neighborhood level, citywide level. We're gathering lots of input, and it's from the people who are going to be immediately affected by this project, and how it serves those people on many levels. What do we want? A multi-use facility, as I mentioned, a community-based gathering space, sophisticated yet approachable design, welcoming to all diversities. And that's really important. Part of the feedback that we're getting on a equity and diversity angle is really what makes a civic building approachable culturally. So we have a deeper understanding. And so we're not creating barriers, we're opening doors. And that's really a primary goal of this project. Architects, we like to doodle, but there's some ideas here that are really important. One common thought that I always hear when working in Edina is that we love blending the best of and then fill in the blanks. We like bold forward thinking, things like that. It's really important that this project embody that. Then we look at other things like interrelationships of various components and factors. That's what this place is about, interrelationships of various components and factors. So we look at things, visually, like how do things relate? How do interrelationships happen? Is it cellular? Is it layers? Is it sequential? Is it arterial? Those types of organizing principles. And how would that manifest itself in a building design? We're looking at this quality level of the building ultimately. So these are other fire stations, which is the larger component of the program here. And then some civic buildings. There's some wonderful opportunities to draw from, which, for instance, like mass timber as a structural technology. This is the inside of a timber building, for instance. It's just an example, but very transparent, very open, very welcoming, contemporary, forward-looking. Okay. Edina. You know Edina. I don't have to go through this. It's getting late. Building on a proud legacy of innovation. That's one of the things I love most about Edina is you're not afraid to try new things. And by far, it started with Southdale, Centennial Lakes, et cetera, but the whole Southdale area guideline experience, that's as aggressive as I've ever been a part of in my career, and I've been at this a long time. So this is really about the experience, and that's what Mick and the Architectural Field Office really was trying to achieve, and the best of urban and suburban in a walkable, urban-oriented, mixed-use type experience throughout, with varying degrees of density. Our site is on the lower left of the map here. Then you get into the guidelines themselves. And if you're not familiar with the guidelines, they are guidelines. They're basically the tools to achieve the experience that was desired in the overall experience plan. Our site actually has a lot of different components of the guidelines overlaying it. And that's where all these colors come in. So for instance, yellows are boulevards. Boulevards have a very different setback requirement from the street, a different setback, a different degree of green, a different building facade component, all of the above. Our site actually, I'm going to get to it here, but it literally has 5 different types of overlays on this one site. So we're trying to be responsive to that, or at least not create barriers for the goals to be accomplished down the road. Okay, so as mentioned, it's a very, very large site. Right now, it's basically light industrial, 1-story buildings. Here it is in context. We're not too far off France. That Woonerf, by the way, is actually off of our site to the east, and that's part of an extension that will continue further north. It runs parallel to France Avenue. Our site has the green, which is the extension of the promenade, which is really supposed to be a continuation of the north-south promenade that currently starts here and goes all the way to Southdale. It's supposed to be a green connection between Fred Richards Park and the current promenade. So that's the green. The blue is primary east-west streets, West 76th. The reason why we want the fire station on that side of the site is for access, quick response time. Response time is everything for this. Purple indicates buildable areas. Between the purple indicates local streets, and there are very specific setbacks. Now, all of this really drives for a certain type of density. This building is a different kind of building than this type of density really describes. And I'm going to get into that in a minute. So here's the site. So you see we're edged. We have something cutting through. We have a buildable area and a green zone, and we also have the natural existing wetland. So the first scheme, as Carrie mentioned, was the idea of the greenway being running something parallel to a roadway. And then you'd have an adjacent buildable parcel, maybe directly to the south, and then open green and wetland to the south of the road. And then potential development occurring over time. We chose to present something a little more abstract tonight than what was in your packet. But this really talks to the steps. Step 1 is the Health and Safety Center. As I mentioned, we're running a dual track right now. We've done this exercise, but right now we're actually designing the building. And the footprints are changing. The parking, everything, the location is changing. So when you see us again, we'll have something that might look somewhat familiar, but it'll be actually rather different. But the strength of this one was really extending what was perceived to be a pavement zone with pavers all the way to the green space. Just moving through this. The other scheme, option B, was, again, I think this was a little truer extension of the way the current promenade works, which is something that streets cross over or under or at grade, but it's not the primary experience. The primary experience is either on bike or on foot, and it's really a green space between buildings. And I think that's what Mick was responding to mostly. The city council and mayor agreed with that assessment, by the way. One of the conversations that did come up, and I'll just share, was there was a strong opinion expressed that the larger space here would be that community room. In this particular layout, we have parking showing on the west side. This is looking southeast, so here's France. That this was a better orientation than the other scheme, which put the community room on the east side. And the reason for that was that it was a stronger connection to the neighborhoods and not to France. It didn't need to connect to France as much as it needs to connect to the neighborhoods. So that Main Street notion that Mick Johnson had mentioned could easily be adapted to this side, by the way, as well. there's a little bit of confusion. It's not part of the UNERF. That's something planned further to the east. Again, steps. These are just hypothetical lots. One of the conversations that came up with the city council and the mayor was this might be actually an opportunity for more of a civic campus rather than private development happening. There was a comment about, well, private development might be an opportunity to recoup some of the purchase price of the land. There's a plus to that. But it's also a great opportunity given that it's really going to be in the heart of a localized neighborhood, and it's a connection point between the city and the neighborhood and the citizens of Edina. That maybe there's other civic buildings that could be developed down the road on this site since you own the land, etc. One of the comments that's showing up in here is about staff parking down the road being accommodated within a neighboring building. We've had a lot of discussions on that, and this arrangement may in fact not be the arrangement that we share with you the next time. So I'm just tipping my hand that way. It's important to the fire staff especially that they have immediate connection to their facility. This is basically the same scheme in the bigger picture there. So, again, the purpose of this whole exercise was to do our due diligence to illustrate that this site has a lot of potential and that it can be adapted very easily to the guidelines in this district. That there's both public and private opportunity for future development to happen. But also to acknowledge that given the fact that this is a civic building, there might be a different way of looking at it as a piece of fabric within the city. It's not your average private development building, fabric building. So things like setbacks or green space or even surface parking lot might have a different place here than it would in another type of project. So with that, I'll conclude our portion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Open it up for questions and or comments, insight, feedback, whatever. Yeah, Commissioner Strauss.
Yeah, Mr. Jacques. So the community health and safety, obviously the fire station, all their operations that are served by the Y site, so it just gets reestablished here. And these other functions where are they currently operating from?
Good question. Yeah, some of the current health is actually right across the hall here. It's part of the police, and then other spaces within the city of Bloomington. But
yeah, so thanks for that question. We have our public health division used to reside inside the police department, as Trace mentioned, just across the hall here. With this move to putting the public health division within the fire station and making it really a community health and safety center, as opposed to just the fire station, we have the public health division just temporarily housed out of Fire Station 1 right now. So there's 7 members within the public health division that are officed out of Fire Station 1 right now.
Okay. And I saw there was mention of like a 40 to 60 foot tower as part of the fire station. What purpose is that tower?
Trace, do you want to talk about the front of the building just in the design phase, and then I can talk about the training aspect of the towers that would be included in there.
The 40 to 50 foot high, it's a training tower for the firefighters themselves to practice carrying equipment up and down stairs, hoses, that type of thing.
Do they set it on fire and all that kind of stuff, or that's not that kind of tower?
Yeah, one of the things that we wanted to really focus on is taking an opportunity. We have a training facility in the city of Edina with the Southwest training facility, and that's where all the burn training takes place. The training components of this building would just be taking advantage of the of the building characteristics to provide opportunities for firefighters to train on shift. So using the height required by the design guidelines and making that an opportunity to make a firefighter training tower or stairwell tower to go up and down and do technical training out of.
Yeah, it's a spectacular site, but I didn't imagine seeing fire coming out of windows and practicing in the neighborhood. But okay,
if you have fire come out of the windows, I would implore you to call 911 and report that.
Okay, thank you.
So just a quick follow-up with that. The training tower right now, and you're going to see building plans and actual architecture the next time we're here. So what you see represented here are just component pieces of the overall program. So we are exploring on which side of the building, the street side or the back side. The back side from a functional and a training side make more sense. The guidelines would say it'd be nice to have some height on the street, you know. There are some setbacks that are going to be needed for the station itself. The apparatus bays need a depth of apron, for instance, off of 76 that is greater than 30 feet. You know, that's something that we're going to be looking at architecturally. How do we maintain a street wall while we have a setback? You know, it might be a continuous eave that comes out to that point and provides coverage for part of it, something like that. But we'll get into that as we get into more detail the next time.
It's just a general comment around, you know, as we develop the site, something that I would like to see be considered would be a better way, you know, protecting pedestrians crossing 76 and a way for that to be navigated better than it currently is right now. Because if anybody's familiar with 76, cars fly down 76 right now. And I mean, it's getting from the park and that, you know, a lot of the apartment buildings, especially the one they just built right across the street from the development, dry crossing 76, and it's extremely dangerous right now, right? So I would hope that we consider that as we move forward, some way to make that better, you know, whatever that solution may be. Not sure, right? But I think of myself as, you know, I run all around this community. I avoid 76 like the plague because it's a particularly dangerous stretch of road. So
I think to respond to that, down the road as more streets and blocks form up, there'll be more intersections and more controlled intersections. And right now, that's a stretch where you've got parking lots and you know, haphazard. It's a bit of a chaos. There's no organization to it. I think a better description down the road may be something more like Hazelton or something like that. But we're not talking about roundabouts, but a little more controlled with specific intersections once streets and blocks tend to form up over time within the guidelines.
Yeah, and I wouldn't want to rely so much on further development down the road, right? And to say that eventually we'll get there, right? I'd like to see as immediately, if this is a community health space that we want to be accessible to everybody, right? People need to be able to grid across 76, and I think that needs to be addressed early on in the stage and not rely on, you know, future intersections, future slowing down of traffic, et cetera. Because in the present day, with LA Fitness to the right and that street being wide open, when you open that community center, right, there's just not a good way, I think, as it stands to do that.
And I think this is an opportunity to address it right now because basically we are creating the beginnings of those north-south streets on both sides of our site. Which means an intersection. So this might be the opportunity to say, oh, it's time for a controlled intersection, at least on one of the two now, if not both. It's just an idea.
Yeah, just food for thought.
Yes, Commissioner Miranda.
Yeah, so I'm thinking about mixed comments, and he seemed to like the option B, and you said the city council also liked option B. You know, the promenade is sort of the gem of the city of Edina. I mean, they really did a great job. The one real problem with it is that there's no activation on either side. So it goes through this area that completely ignores it, right? And so because the city is going to own property on both sides of that, if we did make it a continuation of that, And Mick talks about, row houses or something like that. Is that appropriate next to a firehouse, or is that not really housing that close, or?
It's been done. But actually, the greenway, the promenade, I think would be far enough south that if you were to front it with townhomes, for instance, it would be on the backside of a building that
Sure.
would face the backside of the fire station. I think the fire stations are a little noisier when they're leaving, which
Sure.
would be on the north side.
Okay. So the one, I think, missed opportunity that the city sometimes gets into is when we have land that we own as a city, and we should be a little more creative in terms of how we sell off that land. And so if you're looking at something like row houses or something, the way they're originally done in 100 years ago, whatever, is that each one is individually owned. Each one is built differently. They have a similar style, but they're individually owned, and so you get creativity from different owners and stuff. And we're never going to have like more single-family homes in Edina because there's just no room to put them. But if the city sold off individual lots that would be only wide enough to have a row house in it or something. I mean, I think that would be an interesting way to make this sort of a little bit different, more neighborhoody, more unique within the city. So,
Right. That's a good idea, good suggestion. Even if it's just if it's an implied lower scale along the promenade for maybe something a little larger beyond a setback, which is really what the guidelines show along promenade. So,
okay,
totally.
Thank
agree.
you.
Commissioner Miranda, just a comment on the location of fire stations within residential. One of the attributes of a fire station is being able to serve the residents, and so most fire stations are within residential neighborhoods. One of the challenges is coming in afterwards, right? If you live in a neighborhood and we have to put a fire station in your neighborhood, there may provide you may provide some feedback that maybe you don't want that because of the noise, but the location within residential is done all throughout the country, and that's for the quick response and the speedy response for emergency services.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, gentlemen. Just a question for my own edification, Chief Slam, as long as you're up here. You talked about the consortium with Bloomington and Richfield, and does that extend to fire as well as all the other public safety aspects?
The specific collaboration I was talking about with Bloomington Public Health was specific to the Bloomington Public Health Services and the collaboration between Bloomington, Edina, and Ridgefield. But within public safety, we all rely on mutual aid from all of our surrounding and neighboring departments. So we maintain the response for our community so that we can provide the response. But as surges within the system, high-risk, low-frequency events require additional staffing, we do call on our neighbors with mutual aid plans throughout the county to bring in additional resources to help us serve the residents.
Thank you, and thank you for your dedication and all that you do. But to the point at hand, I think the accessibility is imperative, and whether or not that is an owner or actual streets. I think the idea of streets is great, although walkability and to the new Fred Richards Park that's going to be built to Centennial Lakes, it's, like I said, I think it's essential that we are able to make that easily accessible to residents around there. So that's my primary comment. My secondary comment is to all the points that you were making, Trace, about what an anchor this is going to be, and I truly believe this could be a point of pride for the whole community. So I think to that end, we really need to make it kind of cutting edge in terms of sustainability and how it looks and things like that. I'd love to see this with a solar roof or a green roof or something like this, in addition to, I mean, I see it even kind of before you explained it as a place, the kids come and you give tours or they have parties or whatever, and the kids are all, it's aspirational to the younger generation. So I would like to see it be very strong in the sustainability area. And my least important comment, is I think it's great you're doing this cocoa and comments thing tomorrow or whatever. I think it's great that the outreach that you're doing about this. So thanks very much.
And we have gotten very good feedback, interesting feedback, to unexpected feedback. And I always say the best ideas come from the most unexpected places or people. So it's really been a wonderful process, gathering the information. And to speak to your sustainability, it is one of the pillars. And we are actively exploring everything right now as to what kind of rating we'll be driving towards. You know, you name it, it's on the table right now. So it's very front of mind right now as far as that goes, because this is a great opportunity to demonstrate the city's commitment. It's one of your buildings, and if you can't showcase it, why would you expect other people to showcase it? And when you're talking about, you know, building a neighborhood and building a, you know, this district, that is part of sustainability itself, the walkable densification of the area. But also, I wanted to speak a little bit to something you tapped into with the community and the kids, and we really do want to create a place where people want to come, and not just for fire and health. It's really a community center, an opportunity to draw people. And, you know, we showed voting here, but it goes well beyond that. And it's not just indoor space, it's outdoor space and connection to that outdoor space. And we really feel a strong connection to the promenade is a piece of this puzzle. So just to reiterate that, thank you.
Other comments, please? Commissioner Felt.
I'm going to second Commissioner Miranda's idea about activating that promenade. And I do like it kind of not as a street, but it's only going to be successful if it's really active. You know, if there's bicycle or scooters or people living there, or row houses or something happening along that. And forward-facing buildings, I'm going to second that one as well. And I just wanted to ask a question. So you're thinking that the parking is on the west side? That parking strip is on the west side?
That was the preference, I guess, both from fire as well as the council. They like that orientation, that two orientations. One, that it have obviously a very public face on 76th, but then the approach from a vehicle standpoint, a parking standpoint, because you can't park on 76th, it would be that it favor the west. And Chief can speak to why apparatus on the east makes more sense from an operational and call standpoint.
Yeah, kind of two pieces. Operational flow is most important in this, and ensuring that however we design the building, that operations is taking precedent here to ensure that we don't create a design that impacts our operation. And with the apparatus bay on the east side of the building, we know much for our high utilization patients and addresses are going to be accessing off France and using kind of those large feeder streets to get to our emergency calls. Additionally, with the public facing side on the west, that kind of creates a really good break from where this emergency vehicle access is and where people are kind of parking and coming into the building. So it really separates that, so we don't have kind of a confusion on where to park, having people walk across the apparatus bay, which could create a dangerous situation with emergency vehicles leaving or coming back to the facility.
Yeah. And then because one of the sunlight was in one of the, and if this is just a two-story, and if there's the community health on that west side, you know, it would get morning sun, you know, if there's enough setback from that east side, and good western light too. And if that parking area goes through, even just a little bit of south light too, because you can't control what's going to be built just south of it,
right?
Correct? Okay.
I mean, what we're reviewing tonight is kind of hypotheticals down the road.
Yeah.
You know, that's.
Yeah, yeah. How do you cite it? You know, where do you put the big blocks?
Yeah, and the goal is really to put it in your, to start the conversation.
Mhm.
This is your land.
Mhm.
You know, what do you see its use down the road? How should it be used? How should it end up shaping itself over time? So we're just here to start the conversation tonight.
So the new streets on the east and west, they both go all the way through?
No, actually, if you play it out, the road on the east side can go all the way through, but the road on the west side would run right into the wetlands. So
Okay.
we can't relocate the wetlands. So
Okay.
in some way, that would have to stop. But that could be a nice connection, a quieter connection, because it's not a through street, and a little more pedestrian friendly that way too.
Okay. Thank you for this.
Commissioner Bornstein, right?
Thanks for the presentation. It's interesting. And it all looks good. One thing that just stood out to me, and maybe I don't have enough background on, some of the practical limitations with maybe the building size or something, is the large surface lot on the new street on the west side.
Yeah.
Is it, I mean, we talked about these different street typology principles and being urban oriented, and the structure being approachable from the pedestrian realm. It's a 40-stall surface lot along the new street that we're about to build, which doesn't do those things. And so, why can't we put the parking behind the building instead of on the sidewalk? Like, I feel like there's a limitation here that we're trying to just deal with, but I don't know what it is.
It's a good question, and stay tuned, because we're trying to adapt public parking into a street environment.
Okay.
More of that Main Street typology,
okay,
where you have head-in or diagonal type parking. It's really the need for staff on site immediately adjacent, because there's a lot of equipment transferring and a lot of shift transferring that, across the street, which we're basically going to have to create a loop around the south, west, south, east.
Got it.
And it's just a question of, does the parking go on the other side of the street or within the block? And Chief can speak a little more to the immediate staff needs. The public, we want to blend it more into a street type and remove the parking lot idea.
That's good. That was my one point of feedback, is if you could figure out some creative way to minimize the surface lot on the new, because that would set a nice precedent for the future.
Right.
Stuff that gets built.
That was Mick's suggestion too, by the way.
Okay.
And that specific typology isn't actually in the guidelines, so it was him being creative as well.
Got it.
But it is a more of an urban type, condition, or a small town type condition, less of the streets with parking lots. So we're in agreement, and that's what we're pursuing right now.
Looking forward to seeing the next one.
Yeah.
It looks good. It's just it's conceptual, so we're reacting at a conceptual level.
Yeah.
I think just a comment on the parking too, the competing interests there too are this urban setting that we're trying to create with the design guidelines, and our need to really have space for people to park. We don't want to create a training or a community space room where people have to park down the block and make it. So we want to make sure that we're limiting those barriers, that people have a place to park, but still meeting those needs of that urban setting. And then as far as the staff parking, our firefighters work 24-hour shifts. So as Trace mentioned, if they're transferring either between station to station or coming for a partial shift, that transfer of equipment takes place, and having staff parking on the site is really preferred. But we're working with Trace and the team on kind of meeting all of those competing interests and creating that next step that we keep mentioning here, tipping the hand of the next evolution of this that will be coming forth.
That makes sense. Is there something about the community center aspect of this that requires the building to be oriented this way? Because I see why you want to have staff parking on the site, but does it have to be on the sidewalk, or can it be in the more interior of the site?
We're exploring those options.
All right.
I'll just put it that way.
Thank you. Yeah, Commissioner Smith.
Yeah, thank you. This was very interesting. I'm definitely excited to see, how this evolves over time. Just only 2 points. Definitely, and it was touched on, the site has to be very inviting. When people walk past it or something like that, they gotta feel like, hey, let me stop over here and check it out. Let me go sit down in this green space, as opposed to something that's imposing, that's fearful, right? You see a fire station, you're like, you know what? I'm not gonna go there because maybe these guys are busy. They gotta, so you gotta somehow make it a fire station. It's okay. You could come over here and we could hang out, right? Now I know the community center building. The fire station is in front. I'm sure it's going to be a very beautiful building. And then you have the building right behind, which I think will also be a very beautiful building. It's certainly going to be something that you don't want to have competing, right? Like you want the buildings to flow into each other, and not be a building that they're both fighting to see who's prettier, right? In a sense. Right. And so how, as we further the designs, make sure that these two buildings, the fire station and the building that's going to come next, flow into each other in such a way that it's complementary. And I know once you get onto the promenade and you look up, you want to see something really nice. It's just unfortunate, I think, that it's kind of sandwiched in between other buildings, right? You want to drive down France and see, wow, this is cool, let me stop over here. But you have to get onto 76 to see it, So anything that could make the buildings stand out but not compete against each other would be nice, and then making sure that it's very inviting. And I think with those ideas in mind, I think it's going to turn out really, really nice.
Thank you. That was actually one of the council members' suggestions, was maybe this should be a civic campus of buildings, and that they should all talk to each other, and that if you do have open green space in your first step, that it very much connects and is located in a meaningful way, in an easily connected way down the road in the future for the next project or two. And we did talk about other civic buildings like a Edina Art Center or something like that. That's been bantered about for years. But there are a lot of ideas out there. So it's an opportunity, like I said. But there seemed to be a little more momentum toward making this the first piece of a few more pieces that interrelate to each other. So.
Other comments this way? Commissioner Miranda.
And then I assume, talking about parking, I assume that you're absolutely trying to minimize the amount of parking, that, with a greenway alongside it, there should be, at least, not so much maybe in terms of employees, but in terms of visitors, there'd be less need for parking everywhere. And 76th Street could be a potential transit way or something, but anything to minimize that would be great.
And right now, the function that's setting the parking needs is really the training room or the community room, and potential occupancy load on it, and what that would translate to in the short term or the long term right now. So, as more streets or potentially district parking or other things come into play, that lot might go away, or, it might be an opportunity to transform it away from parking stalls into something else. So we're thinking about that too.
Other comments? All right, I got a few. First, I was laughing because someone said art center, and then the siren goes up. Oh, I messed up my painting. Might not work. But I've been on this planning commission for 7 years, and this is just such a rare opportunity we have as a community right here, that we own this site and we only need to use a small bit of it. I hope everyone can appreciate the importance of how we do this and what we have at our hands here. So I'm really excited you guys seem to have all the right things considered and are trying to balance all those interests and make the site a slam dunk. And I like that there's still a lot left on the table to be creative with, versus we're presenting it to the community like, here, it's done, what do you think? Right. I think we're just at this really exciting juncture in time. So thank you. And thanks to the city for purchasing this enormous site so we can do it. One thing that came up during the discussion that I was thinking about too is fire station kind of looming right at the center of the site, and we have these roads going around it. And you brought up too about how is that inviting. And I guess one of the ideas that comes to mind is when you think of a main street, it isn't really going around stuff, but what about a street just going right through the middle of the site, and then it jogs to the east where you could have the fire station on one side, deeper, and or another facility on the side. You could have a bridge between it. I know other firefighters have lofts and, you hang up out above. But we could get creative with elements of how we divide the site up, and I picture of like what's inviting, and it's when something's active on both sides, if it's fronting both sides versus you're walking around the side of a building with parking lots. So could we bury parking on the first level of one of those buildings so it's just internal to the building? We don't have surface lots. Again, it's winter half the year. People would prefer that anyways. Specific geography, I think, when you zoom out and look where we're like at the midpoint of the connection to Fred and getting to Centennial Lakes. So while those are kind of the critical destinations, like where people will hang out, we do have an opportunity for a spot to linger since we're kind of at the midpoint. And so if we do focus on not just making it a pathway through, but a point of interest to hang out. So are you jogging that path because of the parcels next door? You don't know how they'll develop, so you could either go on that property line or the one south. Is that kind of the goal?
That was part of the urban design gaming, is the reality of lots. And developers assemble lots, so there's a chance all three could be assembled to the west, and it's a whole different game. But again, it's just playing out different potential scenarios. The guidelines are, rather abstract in the sense that the goal is a 200-foot block. Well, our block is 400 feet wide, and the fire station needs more than 200 feet to, with all of the things. And just to speak to the separation or together with the apparatus bays, the key phrase is response time. And getting from wherever you are as a firefighter to the truck. And any distance creates a slowdown. So unfortunately, I like your thinking, but there is a need for a degree of compactness to it a little bit. And we're really not trying to separate health and fire. We want it to feel like it's all the same building. So it's obviously a collection of parts, but we're not separating the health part from the fire part. Really, the bulk of the program outside of the apparatus bay and outside of the community room, it's essentially its own block of combined function. The firehouse, it's a house on the second floor. They live there.
Yeah.
And the first floor is office space, but that's where the health office spaces will be as well. And there's also a fitness component that works for both and other Edina staff.
Yeah, so I mean, the site looks very wide.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it is very, what is the width of it?
It's 400 and, let me see here.
400 feet wide?
Yeah, I'll show you.
So I guess to the notion of breaking down the super blocks.
440 feet wide.
Yeah, so, our goal always with the Southdale design principles is breaking up it into 200-foot blocks. So again, you have so much width.
Right.
I don't see why we wouldn't create like a nice main street down the center versus two streets on either side.
We played with a north-south street on one edge, one offset, to make a narrower center zone for the building zone. But again, it's trying to get the apparatus directly onto 76th and not having to take another turn out of Main Street.
So I mean, you'd have 200 feet for a fire station to front 76th, right? I mean, that's plenty. You only have 4 bays, right?
No, it's 5 bays plus the training plus the function.
But they don't need to be next to each other, right? Just the bays need to face 76th, right?
The rest of the program has to be next to the bays. It can't be behind it because you drive through the bays. So it's bays, training, tower, which is a bay itself. So in a sense, it's 6 bays. And then the actual program building next to it.
So the fire trucks are driving through the building and out around?
Yep. They come in from the south, out through the north.
Okay.
One of the design features is the drive-through apparatus space, so you're not backing off of 76.
So that's why it's so wide in the front?
Yeah, so that's where the width comes from, and then the ability to drive around the station and back through it. It limits backing operations that have to take place, similar to our current Station 1, where we have to block Tracy and then back into the building, and creates a lot of opportunities for risk there with our backing maneuvers.
Right.
Yeah, I just think that design constraint really limits how this faces the street to a bunch of the points before, and makes it hard to achieve the design experience guidelines from.
It does.
And
so, I mean, are there creative opportunities to still accomplish that, but just in a less roundabout way, but still effective, where you don't have to back up and. You know.
That is a good example of those competing interests of this public need for response and the Southdale design guidelines, and trying to make a match of all of those and make sure that they're kind of meeting as many of those as we can.
And part of it, you might see even in this diagram, you could push the building to the east, for instance, but getting the maneuver around into the drive-through is hard. You could say, oh, this isn't a parking lot, it's a parkable street. And then you've got leftover. And in running out these scenarios, we always came up short with a swath of land that really wasn't, it was dependent on, it could only be developed with the adjacent lot as part of the mix. And so that sort of has led to the pushing the streets out a little farther, but potentially having, whether that's a parking lot or a green space connection visually, whether it's on the east or the west, and like I mentioned, the preferred was on the west side. But I hear what you're saying, absolutely.
I guess I'm just trying to understand. So fire trucks will enter and exit 76?
No.
No, they are coming all the way.
They will come around and then go in the back and out the front.
But from 76?
Yeah. Yeah, they take the road to get to the back. They take the road to get to the back, yeah. Actually, I should go to the other diagram. Way in the beginning.
And I'm assuming that, the response time is indicative of you're facing forward and it's leaving, right? So getting back is not as much of a priority.
Yeah.
All right.
There's a deeper setback in the back, too, because they do a lot of training on the backside. With trucks outside or not outside, that they use the apron for training.
Sure. The existing wetland, it looks pretty like someone's calling it a wetland because it holds water and is just sitting there. Do we have the potential to move that on the site?
It's a marsh. I'm not a civil engineer. I was told no.
Yeah, because I'm just, if you look at the neighboring site in the midsection, if you moved it and then had the promenade potentially go around it, then you could have it a water feature that has a different point of interest where, depending on how it redevelops to the west, you could have
right.
And to kind of talk about that one, the wetland has been delineated, so it has been registered. The wetland itself, we could supplement, however, it's in a floodplain, a localized floodplain, so that's the item that we really don't have the control over. So the wetland part of it, yes, the floodplain, not so much.
Yeah, I figured it's just the city purchasing extra credits that cost more to move it. Is that not on the table?
On the wetland side, yes, but on the floodplain side, we don't have those flexibilities.
Right.
Okay, more to visit later on that. Other item is, if there's a tower there, could that potentially be some sort of observation tower when it's not in use for the public?
I don't think it'd be for the public because it's
Could
sort
it?
of back of house, unless you, do you see a conflict with that?
Just due to the security within the fire station and having access, something we would have to consider and look into. But then the design of that is really built for training instead
Yeah.
of actually public use.
Yeah.
So we just have to look into that and get back to you on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, even if for tours and stuff, I mean, if this is, one of the goals for the Vision of Edina is lifelong learning. So I can only imagine birthday parties wanting to get set up here and going to the top of the tower. And I'm assuming that could happen, right?
Yeah, well, with staff guided tour,
Okay.
we would definitely be able to take
Just
everywhere.
hold the
throughout
hose and
station.
follow us up.
The challenge would just be opening it up to the public and those competing interests of when firefighters can train and when that could be open. So that would be something that would be a challenge of making it a completely public access point.
All right, and probably my only other thing was, there's always a need for a gathering space, and we've talked about it. And even simple just spaces for people to gather inside and meet in the winter is important. And so having that in a nice place on site would be good. We've talked about the west and the east, but the south will get all that nice sun. It'll face the promenade park area. I guess I'd recommend considering a different location of where that faces or what that's like.
More to come.
All right. Yeah. Other comments?
What's the dimension from 76th Street to the street where the trucks come?
Well, again, that really varies with the ultimate building configuration because I can tip my hand a little bit. We are looking at a couple of different orientations to I'll call it the program block, and separating out the community room as a separate block. If the building orients a little more east-west, you get a shallower street. If it orients a little more north-south to get the visual connection down to the greenway, it pushes deeper. Dimensionally, it's probably in the 250 to 250 foot range, even in the north-south orientation. So it's a little bigger than the 200 foot block, but it's close. It's really hard to achieve that block size, by the way.
For a second there, because we're trying to reduce the streets
Right.
but just the idea of offsetting streets and the meandering, there's some interest in that.
Yeah.
If they're not primary streets, they're secondary streets. It helps to slow down traffic.
Exactly.
It also creates issues, but it creates a little interest.
Yeah. And that's actually one of the pluses to that second option was there was actually less streets on it. It's less pavement. It's more green space, more buildable or green space.
Other comments? Commissioner Miranda.
So Minneapolis just built a new fire station number 1, which seems like a far smaller footprint for like all of downtown Minneapolis. Well, not all of downtown, but
Yeah.
a significant portion of downtown Minneapolis.
Right.
Is there a reason this one is so much larger?
Well, I'm actually very familiar with that one.
Okay.
That was designed by the firm I used to work at.
Oh.
Anyway, it's got less apparatus bays. It's just a firehouse. It's not absorbing other entities. It doesn't have any community space. It is in a very urban situation right now. And for what it's worth, I used to work across the street from it, and they were always stopping traffic to get those trucks backed in. And that's kind of city living. You get used to that kind of thing. But it's funny that the city of Minneapolis requires trash and loading to never back off a street, but they're okay with fire trucks doing it. I never understood that one, but it does take up a little space to get that through movement, from behind and out the front. So I don't know if that answered your question. It's a different program.
Yeah, I mean, it's, I think it makes for a better block, certainly. I mean, I'm pretty familiar with that block.
Yeah.
I think the design experience guidelines were that we didn't want a suburb in the Southdale area. We wanted a more urban space. I mean, we don't want downtown Minneapolis per se, but, we have big towers there and everything, which I presume was partly why we have this fire station here with these, large bays or whatever. So, yeah, I don't know. I feel like maybe something could be done because even if you just split some of the uses, you could put a street down the middle, and then you could just have the bays on one side and some of the public space or whatever on the other side. Looking on a map, it looks like the Minneapolis one is tiny compared to this. I mean, just like 125 feet or something. So it does really seem very big. So.
Commissioner Miranda, one of the unique differences between Edina and Minneapolis is we have our own ambulance service, where in Minneapolis there's a different ambulance service that's provided. So it's kind of those unique differences comparing to that fire station. Is we are a fire station, we're an ambulance service, and there's a public health division that will also be inside this building. So that's where the space comes from. Also knowing that the southeast quadrant's our most densely populated area, so ensuring that we have the ability to accommodate future growth too, so we don't design a station that outgrows itself faster than the station can actually be added on to. So that's one of the reasons when comparing to that Minneapolis station might see some differences.
I mean, I assume we're not going to outgrow downtown Minneapolis, but all right, thanks.
But to speak to your concerns about how is this adapting into the Southdale area guidelines, and as far as street frontage goes, trust me, that's been a very active dialogue within the team. How do we adhere but still meet the functional at the same time? And one of the I wouldn't say fallbacks, but one of the it's becoming a little bit of a default is the fact that it's not just an average fabric building, it's a civic building, and that maybe there's some latitude because of that some of the setbacks or some of the requirements can be a little relaxed in this particular case. Obviously, we're only a two-story building. The guidelines want more than 2 stories, So, I mean, it comes down to real basic things like that, so we're going to do our best. Yeah, but
the more you make a 2-story building very, very wide, the more suburban it looks like.
Right.
That's all.
Right. We're going to do our best to activate the street, to get everything adhering or at least responding to the goals, to the experience guidelines that we can. So
one last comment, I'm sorry. Yeah, I guess tying into what Commissioner Miranda said, the guidelines were set, so when we don't have that block at the face of the street, it's hard to support how it looks. But I think most people we'd be willing to relax whatever setbacks there are on one of the sides of this to squish something over as far as we can because then you could have 2 sets of something right there in the front. And if you said it's 440 feet, I mean, that's a substantial block. I mean, we're trying to get this to 200-foot blocks. The building looks like it's about 200 feet wide, maybe a little less.
It depends. Yeah,
182 or so.
This isn't an exact footprint on this, so you can't.
But even if it's to accommodate the fire trucks looping around, I mean, maybe that's just a street that's only used for the trucks, right? Mm-hmm. And then it doesn't have to be conformed to other uses. But
yeah,
I guess it's such an important fundamental building block of the guidelines that I'd be remiss not to mention it again, that we're kind of redefining it with how it's laid out right now. So,
right.
Any other comments? You guys have any other questions? You good?
Yeah, well, I really appreciate the conversation, the feedback that we've gotten. It's a really a unique opportunity. It's a small building when it comes down to it, but it's got so much potential from a community engagement standpoint, and also kind of setting a bar for the district. I think if there were anything that might be learned from this type of building is adding to the guidelines something about civic architecture, civic structures within a district. Because I think it's really geared more toward generic fabric type buildings, whether it's office or residential or mixed use, but civic is a different typology. And I don't know that it really addresses that nature of place the way it could. So,
Sure.
you know.
I guess for next steps, Carrie, I mean, when you're saying you're coming back, this wouldn't be a sketch plan, it'd be a actual public hearing of sorts, right?
Right,
You'd have
right.
it. Would this be a part of a PUD, or would it be a specific, phase 1 of a PUD and part 2 and 3, just there's no details to it, or what do we need to expect for the other areas south of this facility?
I think that's a distinct possibility, that this could be phase 1 and phase 2 is more of a to be determined. Because timing-wise, we want to get moving on the fire station piece of it. So the more detail may come at a later date for the southern 2/3.
Yeah, and maybe priority out of that, from what I've heard here, is really that public realm piece. So
yeah,
okay. All right, thank you guys. Appreciate it. Exciting. All right, that concludes our sketch plan review, and now we move on to chair and member comments. I don't have any comments. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to share? Yeah, Commissioner Smith.
Yeah, I know it's getting late. One word, potholes. So, yeah, I think we're in pothole season. Yeah, we just gotta start looking at that, And I don't know what the plans are the city has, but I'm sure it's something on their radar. But I feel like I'm driving through a war zone sometime. That's it.
Sure, Padilla.
They're going to put a caribou in one of those potholes on France Avenue. But, no, I had a comment and a question. It's my understanding that there was a meeting by a developer, and I don't know which one, Carrie, maybe you know, to redevelop the Dayton's Home Store. Is that kind of on the burner? Is that something we're going to see soon, or?
Yes, they did have a neighborhood meeting. The plan is for that to come before the Planning Commission for it's a sketch plan. That will be at your first meeting in April.
Okay.
So not the next meeting, but the one following. Yes.
Okay, thanks. And just a comment that it was finally warm enough for me to go out and run today. And Centennial Lakes was so beautifully groomed and clean, and it was just a pleasure to be out there. They take such good care of the park there. It's wonderful. So if you could pass that along to our friends in the parks.
Commissioner Miranda.
Well, since we brought up potholes, I guess that's, that's from our friend climate change. So all these freeze-thaw cycles. And so it just behooves the city to continue down our climate action plan and do as much as we can to reduce vehicle miles traveled on our streets so that we do our share for climate change. So thank you. I'm sick of shoveling snow, I'll tell you that.
Other comments? Yeah.
Just general comment, since my first night, it's a very interesting experience. Learned a lot tonight, and looking forward to future meetings with you guys. So,
thank you guys all for joining the team. One of our traditions is the new member ends up adjourning the meeting, but I don't know how maybe we'll do a toss, so we'll rotate. But before that, we'll leave it to staff for comments.
Yeah, nothing for me tonight.
So just kidding. Now you want to go for it. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Is there one?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Am I the only commissioner without a mic?
So moved. Thank you, guys. That's it.